Hello, and welcome to the recording of the 6th annual, but first ever, virtual edition of the Engaging Women Conference. Every spring, hundreds of women convene on the campus of St. Mary's College in Notre Dame, Indiana, for a day of professional development and networking. One of the great joys of the conference is getting to meet face-to-face with talented and inspiring women from all walks of life. This year, because of COVID-19, we obviously had to take a bit of a different approach. I don't need to tell an audience of women in business about the difficulties involved in pivoting an entire program with limited staff on a shoestring budget under an impossibly tight timeline. It's what women have always done, and it's what we did this year to bring the conference online. And while it's true that we missed some of the things that make meeting in person so special, we had an entirely new and different experience going virtual, and to our surprise found that there were a lot of things that worked really well. Not only were we able to include women colleagues from across North America, but we were also able to share the insights and fellowship of the conference with many generations as attendees participated with their mothers, daughters, and granddaughters at their side. And of course, we heard from some of our audience that they enjoyed the added bonus of being able to attend the summit in their pajamas. We're excited to take what we've learned from this virtual adventure and roll it into future events and make them even more dynamic and responsive for the women we serve. If there's any part of this conference you want to jump to, there's a time-stamped agenda at the beginning of this video and additional information on our webpage. I'd like to give special thanks to the incredible women who served on this planning committee and to our campus collaborators, including the Center for Women's Intercultural Leadership, Alumni Relations, Campus and Community Events, IT, Student Affairs, Career Crossings, and the Office of Social and Civic Engagement. At a time when we could feel separated, we feel even closer to our colleagues and our shared mission. I'd also like to give special recognition to the outgoing director of the Center for Women's Intercultural Leadership, Dr. Mana Derek-Shani. Her support of this program has been unflagging and her mentorship invaluable. There's no question that we're experiencing difficult times and that this summit took place against the backdrop of a global health crisis and a national reckoning of the injustices in our institutions, our structures, and our society in general. But I'm encouraged by the dialogue and action coming from every corner of our country and believe that now is the time to double down on our mission to inspire and support women to reach their highest potential so that they may continue to lead now and in the future. As you watch this video, I hope you enjoy hearing from a diversity of voices discussing the themes of resilience, opportunity, and connection, and that you take away messages that strengthen and encourage you. It is now my great pleasure to introduce the 14th president of St. Mary's College, Dr. Katie Conboy. Katie began her work at St. Mary's on June 1st, 2020, just a few short days before the launch of this summit. Dr. Conboy comes to St. Mary's with a combined 33 years in higher education. She joins the college from Simmons University, an all-women's institution where she served as provost and senior vice president for the past 7 years. Before that, she spent 26 years at Stonehill College, a Catholic college founded by the Congregation of Holy Cross, where she was a member of the faculty before becoming the college's first provost. Dr. Conboy has been named as one of America's most imaginative and energetic voices in higher education. An innovative and collaborative thought leader, Katie will be a great asset to St. Mary's College and the greater South Bend community.
I'm delighted to welcome all of you to today's conference. While I've been on campus just a little less than a week, I already know that St. Mary's is very proud of our Women's Entrepreneurship Initiative, better known as WE, and its annual Engaging Women Conference. And I'm proud, as someone with a long-standing commitment to women's education and women's leadership, to be here with you today. I'm joining the conference from the St. Mary's campus, and I want to acknowledge and honor the Native people and their traditional homelands on which we stand. We particularly recognize the Pekagan Band of Potawatomi and the Miami, who have been utilizing this land and its resources for many years and continue to do so today. With deep gratitude, we acknowledge the Native people and their culture within our community, as well as acknowledging the land upon which we gather, pray, learn, and work. Since its inception in 2009, WE has forged a strong partnership in the South Bend community to provide women with opportunities to grow and succeed in all facets of their lives. It has filled a pressing need to foster women's leadership through innovative thinking and programming. WE's programming assists women of all ages and of varying backgrounds and life stages. They focus on advancing economic empowerment for all women through business ownership and career advancement. One of WE's most well-known efforts is Spark, a women's business accelerator that provides the tools for local women to make their entrepreneurial dreams a reality. I know you'll learn more about this exciting initiative this afternoon. After Andrea Short's video welcome, we will play a short video highlighting some of our Spark graduates. I've actually had a chance to preview the moving video and to learn the amazing stories of several women who have benefited from Spark. Today's event is certainly a prime example of the good and necessary work WE does. This year's conference focuses on 3 pillars: opportunity, resilience, and connection. All 3 embody what we at St. Mary's strive to instill in our students through their education and their personal development as rising leaders. We help them grow and discover their gifts and talents. We help them develop into strong women, women who leave St. Mary's with confidence and with the ability to make a difference in our world. It's why St. Mary's and we are the ideal hosts for a conference like today's, to support and encourage collaboration between women of all backgrounds, of all ages, regardless of where they are in their professional journey. I understand we have new graduates of St. Mary's College participating today, as well as older alumni and women of varying ages from the greater South Bend Elkhart region and across the United States. I applaud all of you for choosing to attend this conference. The diversity in your voices and experiences will make today's conversations rich and very fulfilling. I can't wait to hear about the connections you make together. I know they'll help you grow as a person and further develop your professional networks. I'd like to thank WE, specifically its director, Willow Wetherall, Gabriela Maxwell, Assistant Director of External Events and Community Relations at St. Mary's, and the Planning Committee for coordinating today's conference. We will all benefit from their hard work. I'm also grateful for the conference's partnership with the college's Office of Alumni Relations and their willingness to connect our alumni with the conference. And many thanks as well to First Source Bank and its foundation for their generous support of the Women's Entrepreneurship Institute and St. Mary's College. First Source has been a strong supporter since we began over 10 years ago, and they continue to champion women's leadership in our local community. We are deeply grateful. I hope you enjoy the conference, and we'll now hear a message from Andrea Short, CFO of First Source Bank.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the 2020 Engaging Women Virtual Summit. I'm honored to be able to welcome you to today's event. I can't say I envisioned I would be welcoming you by speaking to a camera versus seeing a room full of women passionate about their careers, about improving themselves, and about supporting each other and the communities we live in, but here we are. We are still women with passion and dreams, just not physically together. We are certainly in unprecedented times, which have intensified existing challenges and created plenty of new challenges and new opportunities. At First Source, as a core value, we have always believed that all people should be treated with deep respect, and we are here to serve. Our mission is to help our clients achieve security, build wealth, and realize their dreams. We try to practice what we preach and empower women to be leaders both within our organization and in our community. Through this conference and the Thrive Seminar Series, First Source and St. Mary's have educated women on important skills and strategies for starting and running a business. But it's really much more than that. They have provided women a place to network, share best practices, build relationships, and be all that they can be. Today, you will hear from a diverse group of women. each with a unique and inspiring story to tell. I encourage you to listen closely. Take something you hear today and apply it to your life. Step out of your comfort zone. You will be amazed at what you can achieve. I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon.
I heard about Spark from 3 different people, and I was like, this would be an awesome way that I can like create a business plan. I knew I could do it, but it would take me forever to do it by myself.
I would watch the cooking channel and I would make things and I would create things, and that was the extent of it.
I just was lost because I always felt that I didn't belong.
I grew up on the south side of Chicago, and you've heard of the neighborhood Inglewood. Yeah. So that's where I grew up in the projects over there.
My grandma inspired me to doing a hard job. You always have the better life, you know, and do the right thing all the time.
You know, like I said, there's a sisterhood, and there's now like a big group of Spark graduates. You know, so a lot of people I can mentor to, and they can mentor to me. So that's really life-changing as well.
I had no idea about anything other than the day-to-day operations.
I've always, because I didn't grow up in the United States, I always was looking what is in here that I need to learn more about how to do a networking, because that was the part for me in the business. And a Spark program, I can refer any woman who want to be in business, because that helped us a lot to build networking, to meet new people, to manage better the business.
I wouldn't have opened. I mean, it's a 20-year dream. Once you're not dreaming about it anymore, that's a whole, like when you dream, it's like sky's the limit. You could do whatever you want to do. So Spark helped me to understand that I could actually do this, and I didn't have to do it by myself.
More than anything, like, I'm a woman and I needed those women, you know, to connect with on a level that I can't with other people.
When going through the Spark program, when I first started, I walked in like this, and I was like this because I was broken. Lots of years of being told that I was nothing. And through the Spark program and the mentors and the people, I could see myself lifting my shoulders, standing up straight. And I always said I didn't have a voice, I didn't have a backbone, and I couldn't say what I wanted to say because I couldn't articulate it. And I always heard all these big words and stuff, but through that, I learned how to maneuver through all that stuff. And when I graduated the Spark program, I always said in my closing graduation thing, I now have a voice, I now have a backbone, and watch out, here I come.
So just providing just a tiny little bit more context for those videos. Ramel Winfield hit $1 million in revenue this spring for her business. Paula Sowers, who grew up working in a migrant farmer family, is now president of our local Latin American Chamber of Commerce and a facilitator with the Spark program. Yuli Ortega employs over 50 people in her business. The stories just go on and on and on of the incredible transformation of these women in themselves and our communities. Now it's my great pleasure to turn the reins over to our first keynote speaker, Valorie Burton. We're so grateful that she's with us today. Many of you know her work and follow her. She is the author of 12 books and a national expert on resilience and happiness. Valorie, it's my pleasure to welcome you, and also to welcome our moderator, Kathy Burnett, owner of Brainlair Bookstore. Again, another incredible leader in promoting equality and inclusion through diverse books. I'll turn it over to you now.
It is so good to be with all of you, and thank you so much, Willow, and just thank you for what you all are doing there at St. Mary's. I'm really excited about it. So I'm going to talk for a little while, and then I know we're going to do a little discussion and Q&A. So I am going to talk a bit just about resilience for a few minutes here. Obviously, in the times we're living in, this is a more important topic than ever, and more personal, I think, than ever. Years ago, several years ago, I wrote a book called Successful Women Think Differently. And the whole premise is this idea that if we take two women with similar backgrounds, with similar gifts and talents, with similar experiences, we often find that we have one woman who is succeeding or excelling, and we may have another who is struggling a bit. And so I began asking myself, what is the difference? What is the what makes the difference between the person who succeeds at high levels and the one that tends to languish or struggle a bit? And what the research shows us, and just even anecdotally, all of us have probably seen it to some extent, is that in the face of challenges and even opportunities, successful women actually say something different to themselves. In other words, they think differently, which causes them to make decisions differently, which causes them to stand up differently. I love in the video the woman who said, when I began, I was, I didn't believe as much in myself. And going through this, my shoulders are back and I'm seeing things differently. So the question I have for each one of you as we are dealing with unprecedented times is, what are you saying to yourself in the face of the challenges that all of us are now facing? When we put this in the context right now of the pandemic that we are in the midst of nearly 20% unemployment, of a civil rights crisis that we're facing, what does it mean to think differently, and why do we need to do it now? Why do we need to pay more attention and closer attention to what we're saying to ourselves in the face of the challenges that we're facing? So what you say to yourself basically determines what you do, what you feel, and what you say. And a lot of times we really believe that we go from the stressors that occur in our lives to our reactions. We'll even describe it in that way. Like, why is she so upset? And we'll talk about what happened. But the truth of the matter is, between the stressor or the event that's happening and the reaction that we have to it is a thought. And if we can become more aware of our thoughts in the midst of our challenges, we can completely transform everything that we do. We can transform how we show up. We can transform the level of the goals that we set and our belief that we can actually achieve them. That belief causes us to move forward. That belief is the confidence that turns our thoughts about what's possible into action. So I just want to take a few moments to basically coach you. And coaching is really about asking the right questions that will help you get the answers that you need. So if you are near somewhere where you have a pen and paper, jot these questions down. If you are somewhere where you don't have pen and paper, dictate it to your phone, jot it down in your notes inside your phone. We all usually have something nearby where we can take notes. My background is in a subject called positive psychology, and we often think of traditional psychology as fixing things that might be wrong, which is extremely important, but positive psychology is the study of what happens when things go right with us, what happens that causes us to be happier, to be more productive, to perform at our highest levels, and to be resilient in the face of our challenges. And I really believe resilience is a skill we should all learn in school. It's something that we need not just in our goals as business owners and entrepreneurs and professionals, but also in our everyday lives, in our relationships, in our finances, when it comes to our health, in our communities. We need resilience. So here is my first question for you. I want you to really think about what has been stressing you most over these last few months. And for some of you, it's really over this last week and a half or so that perhaps your stress has been exacerbated, right? What is the thing that stands out to you most? It might have to do with just the uncertainty Perhaps you've been feeling more anxiety. Maybe you're thinking about your professional life. Maybe you're thinking about your business and you've got dreams for where you want to go, but there are some things that are coming up for you that might ding your confidence a bit or cause you to doubt. I don't know what it is for you, but just think about what that thing is. And my question for you is, what are you saying to yourself about the challenge that you face? What are you saying to yourself, like on an everyday basis, when you think about what you're going through, what fears you might have? What are you saying to yourself? So just, you might jot it down, you might think about it for a moment, but here's the very important follow-up question. The thing that you're saying to yourself, that thought, is it helping you or is it hurting you? Is it moving you forward in the direction that you need to go? Or is it getting you stuck or even taking you backwards? At the very core of resilience is the need to be aware of our thoughts, to be aware of what we are saying to ourselves. Because whatever it is that we say to ourselves actually determines how we feel, how we act, the steps that we take or don't take, and what we actually say, the things that we say out of our mouths to other people, and even the things we might say out of our mouths to ourselves. So my next question, very simply, is what is your vision? You know, when we get stuck, when we find ourselves in stressful circumstances, it can be very easy to stare at the obstacle that's in front of us, to put all of our energy around the challenge and the fear that that challenge might create for us. But it's extremely important and a very resilient move to look up from the obstacle in your path and look towards your vision. Where are you headed? Because it gives you perspective to understand that this challenge that's in front of me, this obstacle that's in front of me, is just a part of the journey. This isn't the end of the journey. This is a part of the journey. What is it that I am supposed to learn from this? How is this supposed to grow me? What opportunity does this challenge present? And even in the midst of the most difficult challenges, we can find opportunity. In fact, one of my favorite pieces of research is around the topic of post-traumatic growth. And most of us have heard of post-traumatic stress disorder, but many of us have never heard of post-traumatic growth. And it's the idea that we can go through something very, very difficult, and on the other side of it, be able to say, I am in some way better. I am in some way changed or transformed in a positive way. There's something I know now that I didn't know before that actually makes me stronger, wiser, better equipped to do the things in my life that I know I'm called to do. So very, very simple question, but a very important question to be able to ask. What is your vision? Where are you going? Because you've got to be able to look up from that vision in order to gain the perspective you need when the obstacles show up. So you don't begin confusing the obstacles with your vision. All right, here's my next question. Looking back 5, 10, maybe 20 years from now, you pick the amount of time. Looking back at this moment in time, what will you wish you had done? What will you wish you had done? So oftentimes we don't step back to consider the legacy, to consider even the blessing of where we are right now. So when I think about where we are specifically with regards to the pandemic, with regards to the civil rights issues that are and the racial stress that we're all dealing with right now, when we think about the economy, it's very easy to just look at where we are. But the more important question is, how do you want to show up right now? What is the opportunity right now? For many of us, there's been an opportunity to connect in new ways with our families. There might be more time on your hands, and although you might not have wanted more time, because maybe that's because you don't have the same number of customers, or perhaps you or a spouse has experienced a furlough or a layoff, there's still an opportunity in that. What do you want to do with that time? When you're looking back a few years from now, what will you wish you had done? This is how the most resilient women and people in general think. They step back from the situation, look at the bigger perspective, and find meaning and purpose in it. When we do that, it pulls us forward. It gives us hope. And it helps us to see that even though we're going through difficult circumstances, there is something greater at work. And we need to be tuned in to whatever that greater thing is. All right, just a couple of more questions, and then we're going to go to our panel discussion I'm really excited about. So my next one has to do with relationships. In order to be able to process the things that we need to process, it is extremely important that we reach out in those relationships that we have, that we connect, that we talk through the challenges that we have. And we can't do that without relying on the people in our lives who understand us. We must have that emotional safe space to be able to talk through things, to feel heard and to feel understood. And so who is that for you? The researcher Jonathan Haidt calls it having a hive, that place that feels very safe. We all need a hive. And when we think about that in the times that we are in, I think it's even more important than ever to identify your hive. Maybe it's already there. Maybe you have been meeting via Zoom or texting one another, or maybe it's a Facebook group because you're not able to meet in person right now. Maybe it's just one or two people and you talk to them individually, but you feel that stress level go down. You make wiser decisions. You have that place you go that feels safe. I think this is really, really critical for everyone, especially when we think about some of the issues we're going through right now, where we really have to have that safe space to talk about our hurt, our pain, our anger, our sadness. Having a hive is essential. All right, here's my last point, and probably my most, probably my favorite. I think there's a myth that we hear often that successful women and successful people in general are fearless, that being resilient means being fearless, that things don't bother us the way it might bother other people. But the most successful women, the most resilient women are not fearless. Just let that go. It's a myth. Everybody has fear. They are courageous. If you can find your courage in the face of your doubts, your insecurities, your fears, you will accomplish more than you even realize right now is possible. And so when you feel that fear, when you're stepping out of your comfort zone to move towards a bigger vision for your business, for your career, for your life, expect to feel fear. When we step out of our comfort zone, it's uncomfortable. I don't know why we expect to step out of our comfort zone and still feel like our normal selves, still feel like everything is just fine, because it's not. We're out of our comfort zone. We're being stretched. And so I'm wondering where for you right now. I mean, you're here, you're at this summit. Obviously, you have even bigger dreams for what you want to do. You're seeking out that knowledge and that inspiration. Just know that your fear is natural. It's normal. It's okay. It's a part of the process. In fact, it is probably a sign that you're on the right path. If there is no fear, no discomfort, then you're not stretching and you're not growing. But when you stretch out of that comfort zone and really understand, hey, this is uncomfortable, what ends up happening is your comfort zone grows and eventually it gets bigger. And then you begin stepping out of that bigger comfort zone and stretching even more. This, I believe, is the essential work of resilience and success. To get comfortable with being uncomfortable, to have uncomfortable conversations, to be willing to hear no in the face of your fear of rejection and fear of disapproval. It is saying, I feel fear, and that's just a part of being a successful and resilient woman. If I'm not feeling any fear, perhaps I need to step out of my comfort zone. So I don't know what your fear is. There are 4 core fears. I just mentioned one of them, fear of rejection and disapproval. That's actually my core fear that I've always had to work through and push through. You know, I often kept my dreams small because I didn't want to have to get everyone else to come along and agree. Sometimes I felt afraid to even pitch my ideas because hearing no felt so devastating. For some of you, that's not your fear at all. Your fear might be fear of failure because of the embarrassment of failure, or feeling that failure is not an event, but a condemnation somehow on who you are. For others, it's not fear of failure, but fear of success. I don't know if you've noticed, there's a lot of expectation that comes with success. There's the pressure. Can I keep this up? There's the responsibility level. And oftentimes when you are successful, that continues to pile up as people want more and more from you because you're so good and so reliable, and that can create fear. And then for others, it's the fear of losing control, that fear of uncertainty, which right now so many of us have. If you are one of those control freaks, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? And so in the face of those fears, if we can say, I don't need to be fearless. It's okay to have the fear. Let me ask myself, what am I afraid of? Okay, what if that happens? What will I do then? Oftentimes what we need and what builds up our courage in the face of our fears is to actually question those fears, is to actually say to ourselves, all right then, and what if? What if that happens? What will I do? Typically what we find is that we'll just keep moving forward, or we'll find a new way. But that it's worth it in the face of our fears to muster the courage to keep going despite them. So those are my words I wanted to be able to share with you today, specifically around the topic of Successful Women Think Differently. Of all the books I've written, that is the one that has been the most popular, translated into the most languages. But I asked you the questions because I really believe self-coaching is such an important component of becoming more resilient. And self-coaching is simply asking yourselves the questions that address your fears and your concerns, and then enable you to move forward despite them. So I think, Kathy, you can come up now.
So thank you for that, Valorie. I wrote down a lot of things, especially the part about the words you tell yourself. That was one thing that I learned about in the Spark program, was that you can manifest things with the way you think. And a lot of times if you focus on the negative so much, that's what you continue attracting. Yeah. So you have this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy of it's not working, but it's not working because you keep saying it's not working. So I really love that. I mean, I'm sure that's true for a lot of the women that are here today. So we already have our first question.
Okay.
We would like for you to talk about imposter syndrome.
Okay. I actually talk about imposter syndrome in the very first chapter of Successful Women Think Differently because it's such an issue for so many of us. So for those of you who aren't familiar, many of you are, the imposter syndrome is basically, it's more prevalent among women, and it is especially prevalent among women of color, or even men who come from backgrounds where they haven't had an experience of as much success maybe within their own families, and so their perception of who they are is skewed by that. And so we can show up places, we have earned the right to be in those places, and somehow feel like imposters, somehow feel as though we don't belong, somehow feel as though people are going to find out we're not as great as they think we are. And I think this really goes back to what I was just talking about around fear. I think the most important thing is to notice your thoughts. I think it's pretty remarkable to even be able to say, yeah, I think I'm dealing with imposter syndrome. I mean, that is thought awareness. That's saying, yeah, I've got an issue here. How do I deal with that? So I think the more important question is when you feel that sense that you don't belong, or that somehow you haven't earned where you are, and that it's just a stroke of luck, that you combat those thoughts. that you ask yourself, what have I done to get to this place? And the truth of the matter is, if you're a woman, there are many things you've probably had to do and endure to get there that others may not have. Acknowledge that for yourself. So a lot of times we just have to build up our bank of evidence for ourselves as to what we have done to get to where we are, and own it.
I totally agree. You talked about that. Like, so I feel as if, I'm sure people can agree with this, imposter syndrome probably comes and goes. You know, it depends on the situation you're in.
Yeah.
And somebody said, what if I have all 4 fears? You talked about the 4 fears. Can you have all 4 fears?
Oh, yes. They'll just bombard you. And if you think about the world we're in right now, you know, the person who, like me, may typically, my fears may be more interpersonal, fear of rejection, fear of hearing no, fear of disapproval. Then all of a sudden, fear of uncertainty and losing control comes in, which is not normally something that really bothers me. I take leaps of faith. I'm just kind of out there, like I'm ready to go. And so, no, I think that is normal. Just know that there's work to do, and noticing it. So, as an example, we have an internal and an external locus of control. So, those who are oriented towards an internal locus of control really fare better when it comes to resilience. And all that means is that you say, what can I control here? You can control getting up in the morning and having some quiet time. You can control going for a walk to clear your thoughts. You can control journaling and talking about your fears, your sadness, your anger, your whatever. Those are things that we know can help us to process and reduce our fear and our anxiety. So take control of what you can take control of, and then you got to, at some point, let go of the rest and recognize you're not the only one. I think that's also something with our current circumstances that is helpful. It's not an individual circumstance. All of us are dealing with some of the global issues.
Yes. Yes. Just continuing with that, someone asked, so you have your hive, and you talk to your 6 or 7 people, or however many you have that you talk to, but then how do you then bring this out to the community, bring the things you've talked about, or build community so that the hive is a hive here and that's connected? How would you do something like that?
I think the hive does it together. You collaborate. What else do we want to do here? How do we want our community to be better because of us? Okay, so I'm still going back to coaching questions. Oftentimes we're just looking for answers. What I would encourage you to do is to start looking for the right questions. What questions should we be asking right now? And do that collaboratively as a group. You will be amazed at the ideas and the creativity that will come forth. The resources you will realize you have that you weren't even thinking of. So that's a really wonderful question. I think that, on your local level and in your own community, your family, your own neighborhood, be thinking about what difference, what impact do I want to make, and how could we go about doing that?
Which is great, and I do that a lot. Sometimes I think I have to do everything by myself, and I forget, not only do I have these friends, but they also have other people they could talk to.
That's right.
But what about if you move? You're in this new place. You don't have anyone to talk to. How do you go about building your hive? Someone mentioned, you just got to college, and so you're just starting. How do you then get these people that you trust that you could talk to?
Well, I think there are a couple of ways. One, use your existing hive. Who do they know that is in this new community? You have to have met some people in your community. So a lot of times it is a matter of stepping out of your comfort zone to invite, to begin conversation. And that can be uncomfortable, but that's what you have to do when you're showing up at a new place. And then as you meet even one person that you feel comfortable with, ask them, what do I need to get plugged into here locally? And then, of course, remember that we live in an age where we are online. So
Right now, all the time.
Yeah, Google, find out what's going on in your community, find the Facebook groups and start that connection. But reach out. Resilient women reach out. We do not go it alone.
And I think right now we have a better chance of reaching more people because we're all online.
Yes.
So people are more willing to help because they've moved that way, which kind of goes back to what you said about, this is a time to be innovative. This is a time to make changes. So you're collaborating with different people you may not have collaborated with before. You're creating things that you didn't know you could create.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what we have to have an open mind and be ready for that. But what if you don't have this mind, you're looking back and this story you've had in your past has followed you? How do you change your story? How do you give yourself a different script to listen to?
Well, first you take note of the script you've been using. And you say, what part of this is not working? What part of this do I no longer want? Because you are writing your story, whether you're doing it intentionally or unintentionally. And the important thing is to start living on purpose and not living by accident. There is one of my favorite pieces of positive psychology research is by Dr. Laura King, and it's called the Best Possible Future Self exercise.
I like that.
This is where you write in the present tense who you are, who you want to become, but you write it in the present tense. It can be as long, as elaborate and detailed as you want it to be. I used this after I had gone through a divorce at 36 years old, didn't have children, and knew I still had my dream, my vision, that I wanted to be married, that I wanted to be a mom. And it was very difficult. Talk about fear, talk about wondering, do I have, is my hope silly, especially as I got close to 40. But I wrote a best possible future self. I described my marriage. I described what kind of mother I was. I described how much money I was making in my business. I described the impact I was making in my business. And I'm telling you, I read that thing so many times. I kept it right next to my computer. I taped parts of it to my screen so I would see it even when I wasn't really, focused on it. And the life I'm living right now is the life I wrote. And so we have to just make that decision. There's a song when I was going through this period of my life, this was in 2009, when I went through divorce, and there was a song that came on the radio, Unwritten. I think it's Natasha Bedingfield is the singer. And she just says, the rest is still unwritten. And that it really hit me. And I thought, that's right, Valorie, you're only 36. Quit telling yourself that life is over because you're going through a divorce. Start using all these resilient skills that at that point I was, I just finished my grad program and I was in positive psychology. I'm teaching resilience. And I was like, oh, now you get to use all of these tools.
It's always easy to tell someone else, right? It's easy to give them the advice instead of toward yourself. I love what you said about writing it down, putting it where you can see it, and reading it every day, right? The more you read it, the more it becomes a part of your past and of your future.
Yes.
Which kind of goes to the next person's questions. How do we then take this? We're building resilience within ourselves, but what about building it in your kids? How do we take this script and help them also build towards resilience?
Great question. So I have 2 bonus daughters. They're 15 and 13, and my son is 6. Your kids say things on a daily basis, or there are opportunities on a daily basis to help them with resilience. So for example, my son will whine something like, this is too hard, it's too hard. And he knows the refrain and he stops himself now, because when he started doing that, I would say to him, and you can do hard things. Some things in life are hard, Alex. You can do hard things. Let me hear you say it. And he would say, I can do hard things. And so now I will hear him saying it to himself or saying it to me before I can say it to him. He catches himself. So notice how your kids are explaining their successes and failures. If they are completely blaming themselves, like, I'm just not smart. No. Talk to them about effort. We know from the research on fixed versus growth mindset that
Yes.
children who believe that if they put more effort forth, that they can learn more and they can grow more, those kids actually are far more successful later in life, and that their ability to kind of power through hard things actually is a better predictor of their success than their IQ scores. So help your kids. I mean, even if it's just something very, very small, notice and encourage them. Let them know they can do hard things. Let them know that it's important sometimes to ask for help. Don't jump in and fix things for them. And pay attention to what they are saying to themselves, just as I was talking about. So my kids know we take them kind of through a process when they're afraid. My oldest was afraid of going to the dentist. She was so afraid that she was literally throwing up when she would get to the dentist. And we talked through it and we realized what she was afraid of was so crazy. She said she was afraid that, number one, she was going to swallow a tooth when they took it out. And she was afraid that the doctor was going to pull the wrong tooth. Well, that's something we could talk through. So a lot of times we don't ask our kids, what are you so anxious about? What are you so scared about? Because they'll tell you, and that will help you to help them to be more resilient.
That's just a perfect thing to get your last thoughts on. I wrote down some of the stuff you said, and all the things that we should be saying to kids, we should be saying to ourselves, right?
Yes.
That's all of that. So thinking about that, what are some things you would like to leave us with? And what are some thoughts that women, especially to me, women of color, should be having right now? How can you keep us lifted up after this?
Well, I will say, first of all, I know for all of us, this time that we're in has been emotionally taxing. I myself have gone from a range of emotions, from anger to sadness to frustration, or not feeling heard. But I really believe, and I actually posted this last night on my social media, that victory always requires struggle. And our country's in a struggle. We're wrestling right now. Don't be discouraged by that. I believe it means that we're very close to a breakthrough. This can be true in your own life. There may be relationships where you need to have some hard conversations or uncomfortable conversations. Have them. This is the time. And so I think what is very important is that we keep a vision in front of us. When I think of this on a national level, I think of a vision of liberty and justice for all. I think of a vision of America finally, fully being what it is always proclaimed to be, and what I believe we can be if we're willing to look at the truth of our circumstances and our history and just say, it is what it is, but how do we want to show up now? And so I believe we have to do that for ourselves as well. We have to do that in our careers and our businesses. What is in your heart in terms of how you are to impact this world? I believe each of us is here for a reason. And people's lives should be better when they cross paths with you. And the way that their life is better is your purpose. So understand your purpose, have a clear vision. That vision should excite you. If it doesn't excite you, then you need to go back and say, what element of this doesn't excite me? What would excite me more? Literally coach yourself to get clear about that vision, because I'm telling you that purpose fuels perseverance. And so if you get clear about the purpose and you get clear about the vision, when things get difficult, you will keep moving forward. And when you face those obstacles, you will know. Successful women think differently. What am I saying to myself, and how do I need to change it in order to get to the vision that I have? This takes practice, Kathy. It doesn't just happen overnight, but if we keep on practicing, we get there. So don't be discouraged if it looks messy on the way there. If it was
and
easy,
hard things take time, right?
That's right. Everybody would be doing it if it was easy and it wasn't messy.
Yes.
If you're willing to be messy and be one of those people that's like, okay, this is hard, but hey, I can do hard things, you are going to get to that vision. So
thank you so much, man. That's just amazing. Everything you've said has just been amazing. Let me just say. I'm going to send it back to Willow, but thank you, Valorie. It was wonderful meeting you and talking to you.
And hey, Kathy, thank you for what you do. As an author, let me tell you, I got my start because of a Black bookstore owner in Dallas, Texas, where I lived, who put my books in her store on consignment, who put my posters in her window, and who gave me the opportunity to go to the book expo and give away my books. And that's where I met an editor for Random House. And that's how I got my first book deal. So everybody listening, like, it's so important for us to support. I mean, there's very few of these independent bookstores left, and we need to support them. So I just want to thank you for what you do and for this great conversation too.
Thank you. All right, Willow, you're up.
Thank you. Thank you, Valerie. Thank you, Kathy. And if you enjoyed this conversation, I just want to plant a seed that Valerie will be back next spring for Engaging Women 2021 for a longer format. And we would love to have everyone rejoin in the spring with us as well. So I'm going to do a quick transition over to our next moderator, Hailey Thomas, to tee up our resilience panel. So we're just going to continue the conversation with some incredibly dynamic women. And thank you again, Valerie. We really appreciate you being here and guiding us right now.
All right. So I'm going to assume you guys can see and hear me. This conference so far has already been incredible, and we're still in the beginning stages and the first half of our time here. We are going to talk about resilience through story and through some very specific stories of our panelists here. But I wanted to chat with our panelists briefly while people are getting situated. How are you all feeling after that last session?
Great. Seeing how I think the themes of resilience and opportunity and connection are really going to be showing up again and again and again in all these different ways, and in ways where it's almost serendipitous. Like, we had no idea what Valerie's going to say, but I think you're going to start to hear similar things over the course of the rest of the afternoon, and in some really great ways that reinforce that idea. So.
Yeah, very interesting to see how things are going to overlap here. To kick things off, I wanted to kind of introduce our panel here. So we will hear everyone's stories as we get going, but we've got Becky Lindstrom, who is a UC Davis certified life coach, and she is the owner of Ever Present Life. She's currently working with St. Mary's College to develop their wellness program that helps students more effectively manage anxiety and manage their stress and develop emotional resilience, which we'll be talking about. We have Rachel Bell now, but used to be Taurus, who was a graduate of St. Mary's College in 98, and she's currently the founder of RVB Group, which is a public relations and communications partner for lots of organizations, and she's got some pretty incredible stories about her work, and then also how her life has been changed and shifted with being a military spouse as well. We've got Bethany Hartley, who is helping me moderate this. She is serves as a leadership role for the South Bend Elkhart Regional Partnership there. She's the head of their diversity and inclusion sector. And I'm Hailey Thomas. I'm a mindset coach, and I especially work with entrepreneurs on their mindset. So some of the things Valerie said definitely resonated, and I speak with my clients about being thoughtful about clarity, confidence, making powerful decisions. All those things come into play. So we're going to jump into it here. As we talk, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat section. Bethany is going to help me grab those questions, and we can ask some of our panelists once we get towards the end of our session here. But Becky, I want to start with you. How does resilience play into your story? How has it been defined for you as you've gone through your life and some of the experiences that you've had?
Yeah, so my life has changed quite a lot over the past 10 years. 10 years ago, I had my first panic attack. And after the 2 of those in 1 week, having never had them before, didn't know what they were, anxiety was something that became a part of my life for the first time, and I've been living with it ever since. And for those of you who have anxiety, you know as well as I do, it's you have to learn how to live with it and how to live well with it. And so that's really what I've done over the past, I'd say 5 years. And so my life has changed in so many ways. I've been divorced. I came out. I started my own business. I moved back to the hometown I swore I would never move back to. I am thriving here and I love it and I never want to leave again. So just a lot of things in my life, really resilience was key. Without resilience, I would not have been able to do any of those things and be where I am right now. And so for me, we'll talk about this, I think, a little bit later, but I have a very particular way that I define resilience and emotional resilience, especially. So I'll talk about that more in a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Rachel, same question for you. How have you seen, kind of through your story, you develop resilience? What does that look like?
So, yeah, thank you. I am a St. Mary's grad. I'm the first generation in my family to go to college. So that was itself something I was proud of. And the way I define resilience is the ability to overcome adversity, just to effectively overcome it and come out on the other end being better. And so the way it's shown up in my story is that, being first generation college graduate, I moved to Chicago. I grew up outside of Chicago anyway, but had an internship in Chicago at a big ad agency right after college. And then I moved to Washington, D.C., where I was lucky enough to get to work at some really big global PR agencies. I was going to do public relations. And I was doing it well at some big firms. And then I met my husband, who is in the Army. And he owed quite a bit of time to the Army. And he did a really good job of managing my expectations at the front end, because what that means is when you owe a lot of time to the military, you are in a position where you have to move around a lot. Every 2 or 3 years, you have to be prepared to do that. And so I knew that going into it, he owed like 12 years. So I thought, okay, well, we moved away from DC a month after we got married, and he moved me to San Antonio, Texas, which, coming from the Midwest by way of DC, it might as well have been a whole nother country. It was in a completely different place. Not gonna lie. And but it was only going to be for 3 years. And so initially I thought, well, okay, I can do 3 years. I can do that. I chunked it out. And I thought, well, okay, I took the first 2 years and I got a master's degree in English. And I was very purposeful about that, because I thought I wanted to be able to do something from anywhere. I wanted to be able to have work that I could do that could move with me, that would be flexible and be portable, and it would be stuff that I like to do. And one of my majors at St. Mary's was English anyway, and I'm good at it, and I like doing it, and I had experience in public relations doing it. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll get an advanced degree in English, and I can always write, I can always edit, I can leverage my experience in some good way, wherever we end up going next. And so that took 2 years. And then in the third year, I didn't want to try to get a job somewhere and knowing that I wasn't going to be here for very long. So I took the opportunity to start contract working and freelancing and working for myself, just out of necessity. It was adverse circumstances. You should understand, when you're a military spouse, you have to move around a lot. Funny thing is, employers don't necessarily want to hire you because they think you're going to move pretty soon, and chances are that they're right. And so I had that working against me. And what I didn't know, I think obliviousness also contributed to a little bit of this. I didn't realize the statistics also worked against me, that military spouses are unemployed at 5 times the national average, and we're underemployed at like 77%. And we're not paid nearly the same as what our civilian counterparts are paid. And so that creates a culture where for this St. Mary's grad who's very well educated and knows how to stand on my own as an independent, well-educated woman, that's just not a compatible landscape for me. So those are some adverse circumstances that I've been able to move in a better direction, given that landscape. And we'll get into, of course, like some specifics, I know, but that's where I'm coming from with my path.
Yeah, and we, this panel group met last week for the first time, and so we kind of swapped some stories and shared some things. And similarly, there's this thread about resilience in which we're not necessarily, at least at those points of our stories, trying hard to cultivate resilience, right? The circumstances have dictated that we do. And my story is very similar in that when I started my business, it was just after moving from St. Louis back to this small town so we can be closer to our families. And my first goal with my business was just to make $800 so that we could pay the bills that were due 4 weeks from the day that we landed. And so just learning how to, as Valorie spoke so eloquently about, manage my mind and manage my thoughts and move from a place where, oh no, what are we going to do, to, okay, I can probably figure this out. What can I do next? Okay, what's the next step after that? So we've kind of not intentionally started building our resilience, but I'm curious if either of you or both of you have a specific story in which you saw yourself doing the work or the pieces, because resilience can feel very ambiguous as a thought, but as we've all spoken about, it's really a skill, right? It's something that you can build up and you can learn how to do. You can learn how to work on yourself and coach yourself and talk yourself through things. So are there stories that either of you can pinpoint specifically of, this is a time in which I may not have been conscious that I was building resilience, but I was being very specific about how I was speaking and thinking to myself so that I would have a different outcome than what the situation, might have limited me to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd be happy to share probably the moment that I had to look back on it. Like you said, in hindsight, it's not something that you know when it's happening. But when I finally realized something had shifted inside of me, I looked back on the situation that when I knew that it had happened. And it was when I had spent a couple of years feeling like my husband should put my career on equal footing with his in all the decisions that we made in our life, and it wasn't happening. And I just remember thinking that same thought for 2 or 3 years. He should put my career on the same level as his. He should put my career on the same level as his. And I was doing the work, building that resilience muscle unknowingly. And one day I had the self-awareness that I needed to put my career on the same plane as his. I needed to be the one to do it. Why was I continually expecting him to do it? And that was what forced me to realize in that moment, I didn't even know what that looked like. I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know how to do that. I had never done that. Here I had been expecting him to do it for me all along, and I needed to do it. So there was that self-awareness. And then the next step, and this is how I define resilience, which I tend to think of as, for me, it's emotional resilience, which is so key for people who have anxiety. So you have that self-awareness moment. You realize what you need to do and you're terrified. You need to then find that connection with your internal sense of self-worth to know that you are worthy of having that thing or doing that thing that you're terrified to do. And so really becoming aware of my worthiness around what I wanted to do with my life. So when that self-awareness kicked in, I had to develop the sense of worthiness. And then what really fueled my resilience was figuring out what fulfilled me and what I knew I wanted to do. I had drug my feet on that for so long because I was so content for a long time with just following him and doing whatever I needed to do to make things work when we got wherever we went. He worked for the National Park Service, which is not unlike the military in some ways. We moved around a lot. And so, when I finally knew what I wanted to do, I knew the sense of fulfillment that I was going to get from that. I had the sense of self-worth to know that that was something that was so important to me. I wasn't going to walk away from it anymore. And I had the awareness that it was my job to do it. It was not his. And so that was that moment of that, realizing all of that, and those three key components of that sense of resilience within me that have played out again and again and again throughout the rest. Everything that's happened over the past 10 years has really resolved around those three things: your self-awareness, knowing your self-worth, and knowing what fulfills you in order to find the courage to go for the things that you're still excited and terrified all the time in the same moment to do. So, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Rachel, do you have a story that kind of captures like that moment for you in your head where you're like, oh, I know what to do?
I do. And it's interesting because, gosh, there's just so many good things I've absorbed since the beginning of this conference today that I'm assimilating as I go here. My husband's job in the military is defined for us. I know that my job can never really be on par with the priority that is required of his job. In the military, they control so much of our lives, and not only that, he's a doctor in the military, and so when he has a day that he's running late, or something is happening that switches our schedule around, it's not usually something that he controls, right? So therefore, it's not something I can control. If you think you have had a bad day or you've had a frustrating day, and then your husband comes home and it's like, well, a patient died today and I had to talk to his family about end of life care. And then you feel terrible. You're like, well, I just was frustrated about something one of my clients did. So, it's never going to be as important as that. It feels like anyway, right? He never says that, but I always feel like that. So that's something that I know women, we put on ourselves in that way. But the control thing, Valorie said something that really goes along with what I was preparing to say, is that because the military controls so much of everything, they control where we have to live, they control where we may have to go next, they control a lot of our lives. And for me to work for myself within that, it's limiting. I don't really have the ability to look beyond the next small amount of time. But what I found comfort in is being able to control what I can, right? I can't control some of those big things, but I know that I can control this. And so the moment for me where that kind of set me on this path, luckily it came kind of early on into our time here in San Antonio, but I had finished my master's and I had been working for myself for a time. And I knew that it was important for me to develop a locally based portfolio. It's funny, nobody in San Antonio cares about my DC experience at all. They care more about local stuff, like what have I done locally? And so I knew early on that I needed to develop a portfolio of clips, of bylined articles of things that I had done locally, even though I wasn't going to be here for very long. But I was in the process of developing that and working for myself. And one of the articles that I wrote was for a new center that was being built on the base. And it was for like a publication here in San Antonio. But I had to work with the public affairs director on base. And so, I was explaining to her in the course of developing that, that I had, 4 years of experience inside the Beltway working at big PR firms. I had a master's degree in English. I specialize in content development. I have a PR background. I work for myself. Here's what I've been doing the last couple of years. I'd been working for myself for more than a year at that point, almost 2. We were still in San Antonio. And she said, oh, that's great. She said, you should apply. We have an internship program. You should apply. You'd be great intern. And I literally was like, I don't understand. Like, it did not compute. I was like, I just told you. And let me tell you again, I have a master's degree. I have this number of years of experience. I was an intern at a big ad agency in Chicago, but that was like 12 years ago. And since then, I've done all these things. And so she doubled down on it. And she was like, oh, yeah, you should apply for our internship program. You would be a great intern. And I thought, I'm not going to do well in that environment, in that culture, right? military spouses are typically known for, you're really good volunteers. People tell me a lot, that it's not like you even have to work. Why do you even work at all? Your husband's an officer. Those kinds of things, when I hear them, do not compute in my brain. And so I took a moment to be, frustrated. I felt all the feelings that you guys I know all would have felt if you were greeted with that kind of, that woman should have shown me to the procurement office, right? She should have shown me opportunities to apply for, a contract or a job, or get me onto a project, or, not an internship. And so I realized that for me, I had to acknowledge that, yes, that is frustrating. Like, I can't ignore it. You work through the feelings of that, and then you need to decide, you make a decision, right? Like, what am I going to do with that now, right? Am I going to just let that say, oh, okay, I guess for the next 12 years, I'm just going to be an intern? Or no, like for me, I chose to look around and realize I'm in a metropolitan area, which is really fortunate. Not a lot of military people get to be part of a city. I didn't know how long I would be here, but I made a conscious decision to do my homework. I found a lot of comfort in, again, controlling what I can. So who are the companies in this market that I need to know, and how can I reach out to them? And I was really motivated to do some homework and start moving in that other direction, not on the base and not with those people who were going to greet me like that. But I didn't know where that path was going to take me, but the first step was to go into that direction. So now I'd 15 years later, and I'm still happy and working for myself. And it's funny, I'm still in San Antonio, which is not happen. It was not possible. It's not normal. Yeah. I should have had to move a lot of times by now. But yeah, it's affirming when I look back at the trajectory, and that was an important moment.
Yeah, no, I love that story. When you shared it with us last week, I was, as you were telling it, I was indignant at all the same spots that you were. But to Becky's point, there was a sense of self-worth that you'd already built up in yourself. So you knew when you came across that resistance or this external force telling you something differently, you knew which voice to listen to. You understood and had already built that up in yourself. Curious from you both, what do you think is the value of doing the work in every situation in which you do meet resistance? What is the value for you in building up resilience, or the goal of building resilience in yourself? And I will mention, we pulled our slides down so people could more easily see all of us as we speak. But there is a quote from a St. Mary's College. I'll let one of you present or talk about, since you both work with the school, but a quote that kind of came up as we talked about it last week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you were talking about in doing the work, and how do we continually meet this, the work that needs to be done. And this resilience is something that you don't just build it once and then you're done. It's just an ongoing thing. And I think sometimes we tend to think of resilience as something that's going to lead to our life being better and better and better. And that maybe we'll need to be less, not that we need to be less resilient, but that somehow resilience equals improvement or positivity, or, things are going to get better. That's ideally how it goes. But sometimes things happen. I think we all are realizing that now in 2020, that all the best laid plans can go right out the window. And now what? And we are all being called to be more resilient. And so, there's a quote, like you said, at St. Mary's. When I first started working with St. Mary's a year ago, I'm on a 2-year contract for developing these initiatives to help students figure out how to help themselves, because the incidence of anxiety in college students is about 1 in 3 at this point. And so 1 in 3 students, which is way beyond the capacity of a counseling center to deal with one-on-one. We're really needing to look at ways to scale up the approaches that colleges are taking. And St. Mary's is just a perfect environment to do this, because they have this quote that's everywhere. You'll see it on a wall in, one of the halls on campus, and it's on their website. And it's really about, we promise you discovery. We promise you discovery of yourself, of the world, and your place within it. And I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially what the quote says. And that sounds so wonderful. It's like, it just leads to better and better things. And I was in the middle of dealing with like, how are we going to help these students help themselves? When the vice president for mission of the campus pulled me aside one day and she said, "You know the full quote, don't you?" I was like, "What are you talking about? I am not a St. Mary's graduate, so I would not know the full quote." And so her name is Judy Thean. Judy told me the full quote, and it starts with, "We do not promise you happiness. We do not promise you security. For we know that you can be secure only when you can stand everything that can happen to you." And I just, goosebumps, like just to realize like, yes, that is the definition of resilience, to be able to stand everything that can happen to you. And then it goes on to the rest of the quote. "We promise you discovery." So it's like, we don't promise you happiness. We promise you discovery. We don't promise you security. We promise you to be able to discover the world and find your place within it and be able to stand everything that can happen to you and then, change the world. And so, I think that's just, to me, really speaks to how we keep showing up and keep doing the work, and we keep being called to be resilient. And so I'm so grateful to be doing the work that I'm doing. If it's groundbreaking work, to be doing it anywhere, to be doing it at St. Mary's College is really a gift, because that's the foundation of what the college is built on. So,
yeah, I was just introduced to that quote that last week when we were talking, and same thing, instantly as you said it, I almost started like tearing up, because that's really what this work is about. It's not about like foolproofing your life, right? It's not about fixing everything. It's about girding up yourself, like building yourself up, so that regardless of what happens, you can stand it. That's such a powerful, in my thought, a powerful definition of resilience. I wanted to ask, and there's some questions about this in the chat here, but how do you practice? So very practically speaking, how do we practice this? What are your thoughts? Rachel, do you want to start?
Yeah, it is not something that you just either do or you don't, right? It's not just something that's inherent within your character. You can practice it. And then, if you couldn't, then we wouldn't be here. We can learn how. These are good lessons. I think for me, it's preparation. I find great comfort in being able to be well prepared for things that I can't control, because there's so much I can't control. Even now with COVID, right? There's an element to entrepreneurship and that's inherent that we don't control. We don't know really what is coming anyway. So we have to have some kind of a stomach for it. But even now, it's of course heightened. But I always find great comfort in the steps that I can take to control what I can and be well prepared for it. So I'll give you an example of right now. My husband's in the process of getting out of the Army after 21 years now. He gets to retire. And the funny thing is, we've been in San Antonio for 18 years. We're not supposed to have been here this long at all, but we're here. And so now for the first time in a really long time, we get to plan for ourselves. What does that look like? What do I want that to look like, right? I can control what comes next. But his specialty is lungs and critical care. And the Army owns him right now. And this is COVID, right? And what do you need in this time is like the kind of specialist that can handle lungs and intensive care unit kind of stuff. And so it was very real for us very recently, where we're expecting for him to get out. We've been expecting and planning for this for years. We know what it looks like. I know what it looks like in terms of my career. I told my clients, I'm taking the summer off. We're taking a great trip. I'm not available. That's exactly why I work for myself, right? So I can have that flexibility to be available for my family when I want to be. And so we were dealing with recently, what if they need to keep him? What if they're stop lossing him? What if they don't let him take his leave? What if they deploy him to some field hospital and now I need to be here and take on a role that I wasn't expecting, right? And so to answer your question about how to put resilience into practice, it is that ability to plan, like to control to what you can, to be well prepared. And so I don't know what thing is going to be expected. I don't know what thing they're going to throw at us, but we have contingency plans across the board for if this, then this is what we would do. And if that, then okay, we would be fine. I would be fine. And I know I could stand on my own. I'd be prepared. And to the quote that Becky shared from Sister Madaleva, it's such, as a grad, I can say I saw that quote all the time. And I never set out to be an entrepreneur and never planned to work for myself. But those words are so relevant now, you know, this many years later, in that, yeah, I am prepared. I can be confident in my preparation. And I know that I don't know what it's going to be, but either way, we'll be fine. We'll be okay. So that's one way of putting it into practice.
Yeah. Becky, do you have anything to add to that? We're going to be wrapping up shortly and kind of doing final thoughts here in a moment, but do you have anything to add to that specifically? And as I'm seeing in our chat, maybe specifically as it relates to someone who might have a lot of anxiety or a lot of like, you know, feel less excited or less capable in their ability to like prepare and plan in those things, those ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I should just mention too, that quote is from Sister Madaleva Wolf. I think Bethany posted it in the comments, hopefully. I apologize, I did not attribute it. Yeah, anxiety can really confound, you know, that clarity that we need sometimes to think and plan and to figure out what is mine to control and what can't I control. So that's definitely been something that's been a challenge for me in my life. What I have needed in order to, a tool that I have used, so there are two tools I can speak to briefly. One of them is a process of inquiry called The Work of Byron Katie. I'm not sure if anybody would be familiar with it, but
Yes.
It's starting to become more known. I have been using it. That is the tool, the only tool that I use to control my anxiety. I used that process of inquiry on virtually every thought that went through my head for probably 2 to 3 years, and was able to, you know, resolve the things that were generating a lot of my anxiety, which was a lot of the things I could not control in my life and really, really, really wished I could. But, you know, using a process of inquiry, there are others out there. Tara Brach has one called RAIN. I think it's RAINN, and it's the concept of radical acceptance, which acceptance sometimes really plays a piece in us helping to move forward, because certain things are happening that are unacceptable to us. And that's really hard. Like right now, I think there's a whole lot of things going on in people's lives that might be very hard to accept. And so, you know, I think of acceptance as a barrier to being able to move forward to what's next, to finding the courage to go through the thing, because we're resisting it. Mm-hmm. And so really what I found, probably the one tip I'll leave people with that might be helpful for those of you who are struggling with anxiety and all of this uncertainty: acceptance is not a forced march. This is not about accepting the thing that is happening, because sometimes the thing that is happening is not acceptable. And especially for people who've ever dealt with a life-threatening illness or some other form of existential, you know, challenge like that, would know that that's just nearly impossible to do. The way that I have now come to think of acceptance is like indirect acceptance. It's like the back door to authentic acceptance instead of trying to force yourself. And that is to accept the ways in which you might be arguing with reality. You don't have to accept reality, but if you can at least start to entertain the possibility of accepting the ways that you are arguing with what's happening, like it's happening and there's no changing it, and you start to become aware, that self-awareness piece again is key. You're becoming aware that you're arguing with it. If you can at least just accept that you're arguing with it, have that conversation with yourself. That is the way to start to become more, it's like more form of organic acceptance. I see this thing happening. I don't like it. I don't want it. I won't wish it on anyone. I don't want it to ever happen to me again. And I also see that I am arguing with reality. And that helps you start to understand how much energy that drains when you do that, how much that takes up in your brain, that energy and those thoughts from arguing with the reality, how much harder that makes it to be clear on what you want. And so, I think finding a process of inquiry, and it may be, you know, through therapy, there are a number of different processes that can work. Cognitive behavioral therapy, I think, has many different ways of approaching that. So a process of inquiry, and then really understanding that acceptance is not about forcing yourself to accept what's happening. It's about becoming aware of how you're arguing with the reality of it. Yeah.
That's awesome. I was going to say, Rachel, do you have any?
I love that too, because I've had many conversations with peers over the years when, you know, they don't want to deal with like the prospect of whatever the military is going to throw at them. And I've always said it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. I didn't want my husband now to deploy to Iraq or Afghanistan, but he owed enough time, and we were in the middle of a lot of stuff in there that chances are that, yeah, at some point I'm going to have to deal with that. And it doesn't help to put it off. It doesn't help to just not pay attention to it. What helps is to be prepared for it when it happens. And it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And I find that to be very empowering. And I apply that not only personally, right, because of what our life is with our military, but professionally too. I heard earlier we talked about, you know, the fear of failure, right? About not being accepted, and to me, I think along with that planning, the ability to plan and have control, another important element of that is to not let that not take it personally, to not let that ruin you emotionally, right? Mm-hmm. To say, gosh, you know, I'm gonna have to deal with that. And not just ignore it. Like, it's okay to feel upset about it. You should acknowledge those feelings and be upset about it, but then move on from that and say, what's next? And so to be emotionally able to think about what comes next. After I'm done dealing with that, okay, now what?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's another emotional regulation. I think something that women struggle with anyway, even more. But to be intentional about it is I think a big thing. To not take it personally. You're gonna have to hear no in business. You will have to hear no. If you're not hearing it often enough, you're not doing it right. You need to be talking to a lot of different people and finding all of the opportunities you can. And you have to understand that it's not a personal reflection of you, or you're personally a failure. Or it's a personal affront. You can't take it personally. It just means no, right? Maybe not. Yeah. That's not the right opportunity. That's not a reflection on you. You yourself are not a failure. You have to kind of step outside of yourself and let your emotions not dictate what you do next. You have to think about it critically, right? And then again, you know, be prepared.
Yeah,
so that's an important number too.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you, Becky, as well. I know all of the links and things that we shared during this conversation will be shared out after the conference. They're also in the chat as we were talking. Bethany was dropping in notes for us. So thank you both, Becky and Rachel, so much for sharing resilience kind of in action, right? In story, in the history of your stories. So Willow, we'll turn things back over to you.
Thanks, everyone. That was just a fantastic conversation. And I want to move us into a break. So I think part of resilience is also practicing some good self-care. And that means we've been spending a lot of time sitting. So we're going to take a 10-minute break. Feel free to get up, move around. And we have a wonderful fitness instructor, Bridget Hardy, who is joining us to lead us in some stretches, so you can come and go as you please, and we'll post in the chat the time when we're going to start our next panel session. So thanks, Bridget, for being here.
Thank you, Willow. I encourage everybody to take off their shoes if they're not already off, or do anything that you might need to get comfortable at home or at work or wherever you are. My name is Bridget Hardy. I'm a wellness coach from South Bend, Indiana. And we're just going to go right into it so you can get back on time. I'm going to start our movement bell, and I'll ring that again just a couple of minutes before the end of the break. So if you're moving around your space and wondering when it's time to come back, you'll have that. You can go ahead and start in your chair, and I just want you to do some light marching in the chair. A lot of the things that we'll do can Can be done seated or standing. So if at any point you want to go back to the chair or you're feeling like you're ready for a little more, you'll stand up. And as we continue to march here in place in the chair, as you feel ready to come up and just march standing, that's good too. This is, like was mentioned earlier, not a forced march. If there's something else you'd rather do, by all means do that. You can continue to go up and down if you like, or stay in one position. If you're going up and down, you're getting your glutes and your quads a little more active as you get a handful of marches in either position, and just holding that up and down movement. So a relatively larger movement, getting some blood pumping through the arms and the legs. And while we're doing that, I just want to tell you a little bit more about myself. Besides wellness coaching, I do personal training and healthy events planning from South Bend. As you know, wellness is a complex thing, encompassing a lot more than simply working out or eating right, although those things are important. But often wellness transformation is a matter of cultivating the kind of thoughts and emotions, and a lot of that came up in the last session, that then motivate us to take action in genuinely self-improving and nourishing ways. And this leads us to choose health automatically, and even more important, to foster the capacity to be extraordinarily happy. I would love to help you be extraordinarily happy. And if you're interested in hearing more about coaching, training, or healthy events, which might include everything from a salsa dance party to a happiness ninja workout. Now we're going to just hold here in the chair. We're going to take a nice wide stance. We're going to start down at our feet and come up and lift the arms. Then we're going to go back down the way we came, down to the toes, kind of sliding over our legs and back up towards the ceiling. And just down and up. Again, continue that dynamic movement. This conference talks about engaging or engagement. The definition of engaged is to be fully occupied or having your full attention. I'm not crazy about fully occupied. It sounds a lot like I'm busy, but full attention is a nice way to think about being engaged. It doesn't apply trying to fit a lot of things into a short period of time, but it implies focusing on what is important to you, being engaged, giving your full attention to something important to you. The next time we go down towards our feet, we're just going to hold right here, pushing that chest a little further towards the floor, using the arms if you'd like to push out your knees. And you can stay right here on your chair. If you want to lift your hips up from the chair into a standing position, you're welcome to do that. You can go back and forth from each position if that feels comfortable for you. And now just coming back up into a seated position, bringing the legs together. You're going to tap out your legs. Nice to make a little noise in the middle of the day. Tapping out the legs, maybe working down to the calves or the shins, maybe the feet tapping back up to the legs, the quads, moving into your belly, your rib cage, up on the sternum, and then out, just down your arms. And then you're going to change that tapping to some massage, a little bit of self-massage. Some of us not getting enough touch these days. And so we're going to remember that we can give some of that to ourselves. And then we're going to take that massage into the meat of the quads and the flesh of the calves. We're gonna raise the arms up into this sort of field goal-like position, and then just rotate the palms backwards, the palms face forward, and then they face backwards, getting a little shoulder rotation in. When we're seated for a long time, particularly if we're at computers, the shoulders rotate inwards and towards each other. This is a way to lubricate those shoulder joints and keep them a little more agile. Now, holding that field goal position, we're going to bring the arms together and apart. And as you come apart, really opening up the chest and then back together. Continue to do that from your chair or in a standing position, whatever feels best to you. As you continue to do that, I'm just going to ring the bell one more time because we're just a couple minutes out from when you return to session. Now, holding the arms together here, and your elbows may touch, they may not, it doesn't matter. You're just going to go up and down here, feeling it kind of pull across your upper back. And as you're doing this, take a moment to really feel the strength of your body. We're talking about resilience and its importance and how that develops over time. Many of us have faith in our emotional and mental resilience, but not as much in our bodily resilience. And our physicality is a nice metaphor for many of the internal strengths that you're talking about today, that we're talking about. Keeping your elbows right here and just opening your arms straight out and then bending them back in. Pema Chodron says that we can make ourselves miserable or we can make ourselves strong. The effort is the same, which makes it fairly obvious which one is a nice choice, right? We can make ourselves miserable or we can make ourselves strong. The effort is the same. And when you think about it, it certainly takes a lot of effort to say, okay, I'll be an intern when maybe I'm better qualified to be the boss. Just as it takes effort to say what you're offering is not the right thing for me. But same effort, different places. Leaving those arms extended, you're gonna cross one arm over the other and then switch. I'm gonna give you my profile here so you can see that a little better. You can be standing or seated. So arms should be starting to feel some nice warmth here as you do this. Now you're gonna bring them back up into that position and go up and down, right? Got our biceps flexed and we're just raising and lowering. So talking about strength in this break, when we come back for another little movement break, we'll be talking more about vulnerability. And in our movements, focusing on things that might emphasize that. Taking back out of the field goal position, we're gonna reach up and then come down, reaching up and coming down. As you come down, if you wanna lift one knee up and then lower it, as you raise those arms up, just alternating knees, making the movement more compound and larger. Just as we layer things onto our lives, so can we layer movement. Putting both feet on the floor, lifting the arms up, taking the hands palm to palm, and then bringing them right to your heart center. Feeling for a moment the rise and fall of your chest, and just the simple power of your breath, the strength in your breath. We can make ourselves miserable or we can make ourselves strong. The effort is the same. Thanks very much for taking a stretch/movement break with me. And thank you for all the beautiful work that you're doing here today.
Thank you, Bridget. That was so wonderful. We are going to move into our next panel session, but Bridget is going to be back afterwards for just another break for movement and stretching as we slide into the latter part of our day together. And next up, we have our opportunity panel. I'm so delighted to transition things over to Dr. Dana Strait, our St. Mary's VP for Strategy and Finance. She's just an incredible leader for the college and inspiration to many of us. And Dana, welcome.
Thank you, Willow. I appreciate it. Rookie mistake, starting to speak with me still on. Welcome to all of you who've joined us for the panel. I couldn't be more thrilled to have been invited to facilitate. You're not here to hear from me, but I would like to kick us off with a few words of welcome and context for our time together. Again, the whole focus of this session is about opportunity, seizing opportunity, identifying opportunity, and then how do you make a pivot and push through with resilience to really capitalize on opportunities as they're identified. I do know just a little bit about pivoting in my own career, about seizing opportunities, but the women that you'll be hearing from will be able to speak to this topic more powerfully than myself. By way of brief introduction, I was a music PhD student way back when, become neuroscientist, who did lab work and research for many years until I got into higher education research and consulting. I found my home in corporate strategy and new product development, and somehow that combination of past experiences prepared me for success in the role as Chief Financial Officer, Vice President in Strategy of Finance here at St. Mary's College in the time of an international pandemic. It's a suite of experiences that are all founded in following my gut, seizing opportunity. And I think what you'll find from our panelists is they have very similar stories. They're multifaceted individuals who know how to listen to their guts and know that by doing so, they have impact on the world around us. Each of our panelists are enormously impressive. And as they share their stories, I think you will join me in recognizing what a privilege it is to learn from them. That privilege is yours today, so allow me to close my mouth and turn the stage over to them. I'd like to kick them off with the open-ended question of please telling us a little bit about yourselves with a focus on what tells you when it's time to take the risk of a new opportunity and make a career pivot. Saida, if you could kick us off, we would love that.
Hi, everybody. I am so honored to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. And the first thing many people ask me is, where are you from? And I realized that Chicago isn't the sufficient answer. So I soon realized they're asking more in-depth where I'm from. But I am a Pakistani Muslim American. I'm a granddaughter of immigrants that came here on a ship in 1951 to North America, escaping religious persecution. So I stand on the shoulder of my grandmother's survival spirit, and I'm a mother of 3 boys, and I am a physician specializing in pediatrics. And before I was a doctor, before I was a mother, I was an artist. And because I've been an artist for as long as I can remember, I think in art allegories. So when I think about innovation and cultivating opportunities, I think about creativity. And when I paint, for instance, when I can't start with a blank canvas, I start with broken art pieces. I start with what I consider to be unsuccessful pieces of art, or scraps of paper, or scraps of x-ray that was lying around. And I try to combine them, and I try to unify them and find a whole. And I cut pieces, I glue them together, I turn it upside down, I blend things, and then I step back and I reassess. And then I look at the bigger picture, kind of what Valorie was talking about earlier, just stepping back and looking at the whole picture. and then trusting that you will come up with something that will be complete in the end, trusting your gut or your intuition that it will happen. And so art has been has been an important, vital piece of my puzzle, and how I've been learning how to recognize opportunity, because I recognize that, you know, even if things are broken, even if things aren't working, there is potential there, and having that confidence and that creativity to know how to put it together. As physicians, we're also called to do the same, to help pick up the pieces, to help solve puzzles, so our patients can find wellness. And in my lifetime, there has been no bigger challenge to the medical community than this pandemic. And, you know, it was really an opportunity for us to come together and learn how to reimagine medicine, how to take this crisis, this terrible time, and how to figure out how to be there for our patients. And the changes that we're making will stay with us for the long haul. And this is also an opportunity for us to re-examine why our healthcare system is broken and what we can do to help solve it. So that's a quick summary of who I am. I often say I'm all over the place, but I always see all of these different parts of me as connected. There's some intersections there, and they all, I've recognized that all of them are important pieces of who I am, and they all mix together.
Thank you for sharing, Saida. I think one of the things that impressed me the most when we first met was how fluidly you combine the many passions of medicine, art, and social and racial justice in your work, and look forward to hearing more of that as we continue. Claire, as you are next up on my screen, would love it if you could introduce yourself to the group in the same vein.
Hello, my name is Claire Caraher, and I am a very recent graduate of St. Mary's this past May. I studied accounting and minored in marketing and enjoyed my time immensely at St. Mary's. And although I have not started my career, so I've not experienced a career pivot, St. Mary's has prepared me for that for many reasons. At St. Mary's, I participated in St. Mary's College Dance Marathon. And for those that don't know what St. Mary's College Dance Marathon is, it is the largest student-run club on campus. And our mission is to raise funds and awareness for the children at Riley Hospital for Children down in Indianapolis. And in my 4th year of participation, I served as the president. And during that time, as my role of being the president, I was greatly impacted, like everyone else, with the pandemic, with COVID-19. And it was definitely it was a very hard time for me to go through, because I prepared greatly over the year for our actual dance marathon event on April 4th. But with the pandemic, I had to learn to adapt and pivot of how to successfully achieve a dance marathon given the situation that we were all in. So with that, I had to fully restructure the marathon to meet the ends of the situation. And with that, I learned to adapt a different structure, utilize teamwork, creativity, and I had to strive in order to achieve success in a different way that I was not prepared for. And in that marathon and the success that that came from that most definitely has set me up and prepared me for when I'm presented with challenges in the future, such as in my professional career.
Thank you, Claire. I will say, when we heard that Dance Marathon had raised the most in the history of the fundraiser this year, as a cabinet, we were shocked. So
yes, I was too.
I just want to say how excited the community was with all of your collective success. It certainly serves as an example to incoming students and students returning to campus who will find themselves in a different environment than ever before given pandemic conditions, and will also need to pivot and find opportunity within a challenge. Kathy, I have been eager for the group to hear from you in terms of an introduction and connection to the topic at hand. Since I first met Kathy, I will say just in the last couple of weeks, I have seen her name and Brain Layer books plastered all over social media and the internet, not by her, but by those who are championing her work. Kathy's anti-racism reading lists and subscription services for children's books have been enormously popular, I think, in the South Bend community and beyond. And I look forward to hearing more about your story here in the context of the panel.
Well, I grew up on the south side of Chicago in the projects, and I think what has always driven me is whose voice is missing, and does it always have to be done that way? I'm always looking, asking questions, and what can I do differently? That's how I became a teacher. I did terrible in the classroom growing up. I was always told I'm not living up to my potential. Can I please just stop talking? Can I do this? I was sent in the hallway, and I was thinking, I always thought that shouldn't be the way education is. It should be a conversation that we're having with each other and with the teacher. And so I have a degree in education so that I could become a teacher, so I could see, can that actually happen? And as I was teaching, I have a daughter, she'll be 25. I thought about owning a bookstore, decided not to do that, and did an assignment with my students, a research. I didn't want it to be a report, which means you just read something and you tell us about it. I wanted it to be an actual research paper, even though they were in second grade. They went to the library, and I got so many complaints because they didn't like the way they were using the library. So I'm like, oh, maybe I should be a librarian, so I could see if there's a better way to be a librarian. And it also goes with my dream of being a bookseller. And so I got to be a librarian. And as I was doing that, I realized that I was not hearing the voices of marginalized groups. Teachers read the same books and teach the same books and the same lessons over and over and over again. Not really all of their fault, because they do have standards that they have to meet. And because when you're doing the work, it's difficult to go and do the research to do better work. You're just caught up in a cycle. So I decided to be the librarian that would introduce them to those voices, and since I have a degree in education, teach them how to use those in the classroom, either alongside the work they were using or in place of. After that, I always know there's something more for me to do when I start getting grumpy about everything, where I'm not happy about everything. And in 2014, I was not happy in my job, even though I had a fantastic job, a fantastic staff who I still talk to now, just enjoyable. But I knew there was something else I was supposed to be doing. I just didn't know what it was I was supposed to be doing. And 3 months after that, I got a call to go to Stanley Clark. And I went there because I felt a majority white population definitely need to have more minority voices to listen to and to read about. So I went there, and it turns out that some of my best friends who I lost touch with worked there and reminded me of my dream to open a bookstore. And here we are.
You know, all of you have stories from your histories, either long past or recent past, that speak to following your gut and identifying when it's time to make a change. Kathy, you just made a comment that struck me. You said you always know it's time to make a change when you start to feel grumpy. I resonate with that, but I'm not really sure why. What is it about that grumpiness? What does that grumpiness reflect that might help the rest of the audience understand what those triggers are for time to make a pivot?
So back when this happened, this last one, I wrote about it, and that's why I remember it. It was in 2014 in March, and in March, teachers do this thing called the Slice of Life, and every day you write a little bit about what's happening in your life. It's to help you teach kids about writing. So I like to do what teachers are doing so I can help them do what they need to do. So I was doing that, and it's the grumbling because I've been comfortable with what I'm doing, but I'm not satisfied with the results I'm getting. but I'm still doing the same thing. It's not anything to do with the other people. It's me. There's a question in my head that I'm not answering by what I'm doing. I'm not in the place I'm supposed to be. And a lot of times you don't know what that place is. I just felt that there was somewhere else I should be and something else I should be doing, that somebody else needed me to come and bring whatever I bring to the table to that other table that was over there. And it's very difficult to leave a place that you're comfortable. It's very difficult to leave a staff that supports you and loves you, and a principal that gives you what you want. But I knew I had to leave. And Valorie talked about calling things into existence. Before I went to Discovery Middle School, I said, when my daughter graduates from high school, I'm going to leave Discovery. And that was the exact year that my daughter graduated from high school that I left and went there. And when I was in the Spark program, I said, July 8th, I'm going to open my bookstore. And those things happen. So it's kind of listening to yourself. Listen to yourself is what she said also too. Listen, and you figure out, oh, okay, I've done what I needed to do here, but somebody else may need this other thing that I didn't think about doing, but still needs to be done. And so let's go do it.
Saida, you have a similar story that dates back to when you were still in school, identifying and trying to distinguish passions for art from medicine. Do you relate to this idea of kind of feeling grumpy, and how do you identify what a right path forward is in that environment?
So I think you're referring to when I was in university and trying to figure my life out and what I wanted to do eventually. And I always identify as an artist. I was a bio major and an art major in college. And I decided to do both because I couldn't live with myself. I had to remove one of those pieces of me. And so finding my way forward, basically I tried to make it work. And then at the end of university, I had to take a year off to really look into myself and decide if I wanted to pursue medicine. I actually had to think about it for a while. And so I think that's what you're referring to. So the other thing I wanted to bring up that came to mind was what drives us to pivot. Sometimes it's even despair. Like sometimes it's a life-changing situation. And I think back to November 2016, when we had heard about things like the Muslim ban on television by our newly elected president, and we heard about all of these words and these potentially damaging things to society. And I remember feeling utterly depressed for weeks after that, and after November. And then I remember hearing President Obama's farewell address, and I was sitting in my car, actually right outside of my Zumba class, and I was reading the words that he had said, and I was reading them over again after I had listened to the speech. And at that very moment, I picked up the phone and I called Sister Maura Brannick Health Center, and I decided that I was going to devote time at that clinic and share some of my experience as a doctor and try to see patients that don't have access to any medical care because of the words that he said. He said, it was a call to action. And so sometimes it takes one of those kind of moments where you are just in despair, and then to see a light somewhere, and then to pull you into that, to actually pivot and make a change. And so it gave me some direction. And after that, things followed. I decided to sit down and I decided to paint more, and my heart poured onto my paper. And that piece that I'm trying to see if I can share it on here. I can't figure out how to, let's see. is this it? Is this on? Can you guys see the screen? Okay. So I was trying to paint what was in my heart at that moment. And the first thing that came to mind was the Mother of Exiles. And so this painting was, it actually changed my life when I painted it, because it was a way to champion things that I was passionate about. So this had raised funds for the ACLU, and a year later, I actually used it to when we were hearing all about the Syrian refugees and their plight, as in the crises out in the Middle East when these kids were living in refugee camps. So I decided to raise funds for that. Then she raised funds again a year later when I had the opportunity to visit a clinic in Tijuana, which was just south of our border, and it was a clinic that was basically seeing families that were waiting to seek asylum, and they were in limbo there for months and months and months, and they had no access to care. And I got an opportunity to see these children firsthand, and so this raised funds for that as well. So this painting really opened doors for me, and so sometimes it is just something that affects you so deeply that you are compelled to do more. And then when you do more, you see how much more there is to do. And it's almost similar to when you understand things, when you seem to understand things, when you're learning things, you understand how little you actually know. So it really pushed me, it gave me some momentum. So I wanted to that's what came to mind when Kathy was talking.
This is beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I find myself just staring at it and getting lost in the image. And it couldn't really be more appropriate for where we find ourselves. Themes of despair, the need to respond to the need that we sense around us in very tangible ways. And I find it so beautiful how you do that. I used the word fluid earlier, but just so fluidly with your many talents, medicine, art, all of this is combined into one initiative, one effort, which I find very compelling. Claire, you too have experienced the need to respond to the change in the world around us and to stay true to your gut and your convictions and to move a movement forward despite it all. When we spoke last, you had mentioned things that you learned. And if you were speaking to the Claire of 6 months ago or to future young women who find themselves in similar circumstances, what lessons you would have recommended that gave you resilience during this time. Could you walk us through what comes to mind?
Yes. So if I were speaking to the Claire 6 months ago, I would tell her that you just need to take a breath and you can only control what you can control. Do not focus on what you can't, because you're focusing on energy that it's not going to get you to where you need to be. And that is for a reason. And where I was a couple months ago in the midst of dealing with the pandemic and the severe impact that had on the marathon, as a leader, I channeled positive energy and a positive mindset. And with that, you're able to achieve so much more. And it really did help. And I think also St. Mary's has definitely prepped and groomed me for that as well. And also I think for future women that are starting their careers, it would be the same advice. You have to take a moment and take that time to analyze the situation, when you're presented with these particular challenges, this gives you a platform for solutions as well as so as well as the ability for change. And I definitely think that going forward, I will take everything that I've learned, and as well as the advice that I have been given or that I just spoke about, and channel that into my future career and for other women as well. That it is going to be okay, and that you have to trust your gut, because when you're passionate about something, it's very hard to then get down on yourself, because when you're passionate, that's the reward. And when you surround yourself with people that are just as passionate as well.
I'm going to hold on to that bit of wisdom that you just shared. It's when you're grounded and moving forward with a passion, how can you get down, even amidst great challenge? I think it's something for all of us to embrace. Kathy, we've been talking a bit about being responsive to the world around us. As I think about the challenges of small business owners in the retail sector that own brick and mortar stores, as the whole world is shutting down due to a pandemic, you've certainly had to ask yourself a lot of hard questions and innovate during this time. Can you walk us through some of the creative ways that you've responded, how that's worked out, and maybe silver linings in all of it?
Well, I'll start with the silver lining is having COVID and not being able to go to work helped me step back and think about what it was I had gotten into this for and what it was I wanted to continue doing, what impact I want to have, what changes should I make. So it gave me that ability to do that. Back in, I think it was October, I was in a Hustle SBE class, and I had been testing different things in the business. I'd been testing, what if I did this? What if I did that? Because I've been grumpy, even though I'm in my dream job. I've been feeling grumpy and feeling like I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. I don't know why. Well, I know why now, but I didn't know why. What am I supposed to be doing? And one of the things that I've always been afraid to do is to talk about my Blackness, talk about being a woman. Growing up as a Black woman, especially in the age that I am, you're told to be quiet, to go stand over here, that if you act a certain way, people will accept you. If you talk a certain way, people will accept you. If you look a certain way, people will accept you. And so I had been buying into that and changed what I was doing at the store. And then I realized that if people buy into me and what I'm doing, then it doesn't matter what I look like and what I sound like. It has to reflect what I believe in. So I started working on, and still am working on, a new website that will give people what they've been asking me for, which is like the list that I put out about the anti-racism list. Somebody asked me to put together a list, and I just quickly put something up there, not thinking anything about it. It was not intentional. It was more, oh, okay, I can do that. And as I went on, I saw, oh, this is it. I want to help people find the books that educate them about everybody. And I also want to help them be educated. So not just have the books, but how can I help you talk about this? How can I help you find people that connect you with this? So that's what we're working on right now, is kind of still the dream I have, still connecting people with these books, still making sure the books are the forefront, but going deeper with them and hoping to make an impact, a bigger impact on the world, especially right now.
Mute. I lost my unmute button. I don't know if the correct screen is projected right now. Do you see the Brain Layer Books website, audience? Kathy, do you see it?
I do.
I just want to reference the list, that some of the work that she's been doing in terms of pivoting and ensure that this website is out there.
When I originally made that list, it was for teachers because that's who I work with the most. And I had some people asking me about that. So I took out, there was a phrase at the top that said, for the teachers and the kids they teach, which is why I had adult books and kid books, because I think everybody needs it. And then I realized that it's not just for teachers, it's for everybody. And that very first book is the book that I am champion. Everybody should read that book right now. As a matter of fact, we'll be talking to that author soon. But Stamped gives us the history of racism and anti-racism, which is what we should be doing. You're either you have racist thoughts or if you have anti-racist thoughts, and you go back and forth. And I think this is an opportunity for us to, this is a chance for us to take advantage of that opportunity. I have had so many people order these books, and I'm so hopeful for our country right now, because it looks like we are ready for this, and we are talking about this.
I think it's a great example, again, of how following one's passion ends up being the perfect place to be at the perfect time. Just a great example of that. Saida, how is you as a physician during the time of a pandemic? You spoke a bit in your intro about using your creativity to re-envision how you serve and connect with your patients in the current environment. But can you walk us through the challenge and reality of that?
Sure. So I was going to share a screen. Let's see.
I can't figure out how to unshare my screen, so hopefully, okay.
Can you see that image there? Okay. Okay. So I'll start with that picture. I was lucky enough to be on call that weekend where everything turned upside down. I think it was Friday the 13th, right after that weekend. And I had actually switched call with another one of my colleagues, and I landed on that weekend. And it was 3 days of incredible anxiety. I remember downloading Headspace, which is free to all healthcare providers during all of this, to help me breathe through all of the intense anxiety that I had about what was going to happen, how much are we going to be at risk, how badly is this going to affect our community here, what are we doing to keep people safe, so many questions. And so that weekend, me and a few of my colleagues, we joined together in the office, and in a couple of days we figured out how to launch telemedicine, which we had never done before at the South Bend Clinic. This is the first time we had used it, at least in pediatrics. So we began seeing patients online, patient after patient, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, and most of them wanted reassurance. They wanted to know that they're okay. If a fever is going to be, does that mean that my child has coronavirus? What do we do? And then we had to, in those 2 days, set up a protocol, how to safely see patients, without, making them feel like they are at risk, and without putting our nurses and our staff at risk, and trying to figure out how to navigate this entirely new world that we've never seen before or could have imagined having to deal with before. So it was a very steep learning curve, and I felt fortunate that I was there that weekend, because it allowed me to be a part of it and to be able to to help put things together and help create a plan, which actually helped alleviate some of my anxiety over all of this. So that was really when that weekend when things changed, and then we started to find a new normal after that. I also started painting a lot more. I started a series called Art in the Time of COVID, which I started publishing online, and basically found a community, or helped to create a camaraderie, to help open up conversations, at least in my circle, about how it is that this is affecting us personally. And it really helped to really find those, make those friendships that, for instance, as colleagues, we don't always talk about our feelings. We don't talk about what's going on at our workplace. But I found that, some of the art that I was sharing was a conversation opener. It helped open those floodgates of feelings, and it helped it helped us. I would like to think it helped kind of name our feelings, and so I had been painting literally every day since this. So any days I would have off, I would be sitting there. Most of these were done actually on my iPad because I didn't have time to open up my canvases and my oil paints. So this was a way of relieving stress. This was a way of sharing emotions, and then I have to mention, we talked about the Hive, and for a few years now, I've been part of a Facebook group actually, which has become more than just a Facebook group of 70,000 women, physician women online, called the Physician Moms Group. It was started by Dr. Hala Sabri al-Nagar, and she formed this group, and I have formed friendships there that are as real as friendships that I've had in person with people growing up, and that we have this sense of community, this sense of camaraderie, and especially in times like this, comparing notes, sharing feelings, sharing struggles, sharing successes. It has been everything. And so finding that sense of belonging, finding your hive, finding your tribe, finding your people that will help reaffirm what it is that you are wanting to do in life, and to help keep you on that straight path has been amazing.
Saida, you and Kathy actually both recently, Brian, and I'm intentionally avoiding a question to Claire right now because I don't see her here. Oh, she's back. Connection difficulties, I believe. Well, I'll continue this line of questioning and get back to you. You brought up the Hive, and you also mentioned that some days you didn't even have the time to pull out your canvases. You were painting on your iPad, and it just reminded me how while we might want to praise the multifaceted life where you're following all of your passions and everything you do is together in one, it also takes an enormous toll on the person, on the personal life, and I think on the spirit and energy that one has to approach life with. Kathy, you also mentioned feeling in the past hesitance to be a Black woman and to be fully you in your environment. And that also reminded me of the energy that it takes to be fully oneself and bring all of one's passions together. I think especially poignant given race conditions in our country. Claire, I would imagine that you've had many points of exhaustion these last few months, but if you all could speak to our audience on how one cares for the self and manages that exhaustion during times of intense output, I think we would all appreciate your guidance.
Well, I definitely was on Zoom a lot, so I did have to purchase some blue light glasses because I had a lot of just endless Zoom meetings and planning and prepping, but also preparing for it in a realistic manner, considering that we had a short amount of time to restructure a whole different marathon. And we did that, and we came to the conclusion and executive decision for this marathon, if we want a marathon to occur, it's going to be virtual. And it was definitely anxiety filled and definitely the fear of failure, the fear of success. But I knew in my heart that no matter what, there needs to be a marathon, virtual, traditional, non-traditional, and we did it. And I think just like all the exhaustion and difficulty that we faced in that time of preparing, it paid off. And that's what it takes also, I think, that like pain and exhaustion in order to find success or that light at the end of the tunnel. So I think just channeling that energy and making something positive of it will get you to something positive later, and you'll find success in that matter. And I did, and we all did, for everyone that did participate. And I could not be more proud of the success that we generated, and also how I think maybe future marathons are going to be looked at based on the success of this past year's marathon.
Thank you, Claire. Kathy, how do you do it all and be all things to all people while maintaining a stable sense of self?
I will say I'm probably the opposite of Claire. I have ADHD and I am bipolar. So I try to take constant breaks from technology, and I love technology. So I have a schedule that I've written out of how much time I can spend in front of the computer, and then I have to walk away. When I first get up in the morning, I read. A lot of people read at night before they go to bed, but I do it in the morning because I find if I have that calm into my day, I read, and then I look at my schedule, and then I get started with my day. It goes better. I go to bed early. I love sleep. Sleep changes everything for me. It actually helps me to think better, so I do a lot of sleeping. My computer is set to shut itself down by 8:55 most nights, so I have to intentionally open it back up or start the new program, so then I am aware I am choosing to spend this time in this manner. Because a lot of times, especially now, you're on the computer, it's 1 o'clock, and then it's 1 o'clock tomorrow, and you don't even know what happened to that time. So I use a lot of alarms. You can ask my friends who, somebody mentioned book club. In my book club, my alarm on my phone always goes off at the time that we have to be done with book club. It's like, oh, sorry. It's almost like I'm a psychiatrist. I'm sorry, your time's up now. We're going away. So I am very strict with my time. And it allows me actually to, I feel, have a greater impact because I'm being intentional about the choices that I make. And not to say that I don't pull all-nighters, because this week I have averaged over 600 orders per day. And so I've had very, very, very little sleep this week. Very little.
So pivoting to a virtual, from brick and mortar to virtual, it's working okay.
Yes, it is.
Saida, can you talk with us a little bit about personal care, soul care? I know that you also have a family. That's a lot to manage.
I have 3 boys, and they promised. There we go. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I have 3 boys. They are super quiet right now because they promised me they would be, but I think they're up to something. I'm a little bit worried. But self-care, so important. I'm still learning how to do that. I've only just recently discovered meditation. For me, disconnecting with the world for a short amount of time is really what helps reset me. So whether that's painting, which honestly, when you're painting, you are focused completely on what you're doing and you forget what's going on around you. If you really get into it, there's a certain point where you're just completely into that piece of artwork. That's healing. I belong to a dance fitness studio, so I dance about 3-4 times a week, which is it's as much for my emotional health as it is for my physical health. I haven't been able to go since March, which is really hard. But I do actually sneak out of the house every night and I walk for about an hour with my music. And I come home and I'm much more relaxed and happier and feel a sense of renewal after that. The other thing is, and this is something I'm working on, is letting go of any perfectionist tendencies that we have. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is to act. And sometimes if you are trying to do things perfectly, it becomes more of a performance than an action. And just jumping in and just doing things instead of worrying about if the circumstances around you aren't perfect. And that's a state of mind that I'm trying to correct. And I think that gives us a lot of unnecessary stress, and letting go of that. I've found that that's important. So those are ways that I'm still learning, trying to figure this out. Because, and you recognize that stress will always be there. There will always be situations in life that are pushing us, over the edge. They're trying to, throw us off. and we have to learn how to the coping strategies, learning how to meet them, and while keeping ourselves whole and keeping ourselves focused. So that's a skill, that's an art that that I think we are all trying to understand better. But those are my ways that I found that are helpful to me.
As you were speaking there, I was seeing a lot of nodding from our other participants here, as well as some resonating in the chat, especially around the topic of perfectionism and choosing action rather than having it all details ironed out. And I think that that's a very appropriate theme given the context of the panel about opportunity, seizing opportunity and pivoting, and how are you resilient in the midst of that. I think forcing oneself to be action biased, to follow and take action based off of gut, passion and instinct is something that's really critical, not only to making a pivot, but also to sustaining it and pushing through to that product on the other side. Kathy, Claire, you were both of the heads that I saw nodding here. How does that resonate with you? Would you consider yourselves action biased by nature, or is it something that's forced?
I am a huge person. I love change. I am all about change. And so I try to move forward and then look back after to see if I could change something. I feel like everything can be changed. I can put this list of books up there and nobody likes it and I can go change it. And so that's kind of how I live everything. Although when you're in your passion, like Claire says, and to me, my passion is connecting people to books. Like that is like my thing that I love more than anything, is giving you the book that will change your life and what you're doing. When you're in that and I'm reading, because I read a lot. I don't know what else is happening anywhere else. I am in this book and I am reading, and I do a lot of writing, and that's usually where I figure out what I should be doing next, as I'm just writing and writing and writing. I would like to be a perfectionist. I would like to actually be neater all around and everything. This is why I can't really run the store, because I am a mess, and you could see that when you're at the store. I have a person now who actually does the cleaning, and so she makes sure the shelves are clean. She's actually helping me with orders and stuff now too. It's like, I don't know how to put these things together to make them look pretty. I am just by myself. Could you please do that for me? I would just put them in a pile, and to me, that's good enough.
I would say that I'm more so, I think, the opposite of Kathy when it comes to the action bias. I would say it's by force. I like when things are the same and there is not a lot of change, because I learn, say, from the past leaders of Dance Marathon, okay, these are the emails to send. This is the day we're going to have the 5K. This is how the marathon's going to be. So when I was presented the challenge of it being a virtual marathon, I'm like, okay, I have to react and I'm forced to change. But it turned out it was so much fun. It was nice being a leader that I made a whole new layout. And I think that has just definitely changed my personality and my view of things, and to be more, to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because it was definitely uncomfortable at that point of time. But I just think it was nice and very interesting to be a brand new leader in that challenge and in that sense, to make these decisions, and also to help the incoming leaders and the incoming presidents for Dance Marathon. But overall, I do like a steady, stable, not a lot of change. But again, as I go back, I think I'm more open to taking more risks if it involves change.
I think it's a learned practice, is my theory. Some of us, the Kathys out there, find it instinctively. But, Claire, when we first met, you mentioned the lessons that you've learned through your Dance Marathon experience during COVID-19 and how you would carry them forward. And I imagine that taking action and risk amidst a inclination for a steady foundation and perfection is one of those. I can't thank all of you enough for being part of the panel and representing St. Mary's College in the context of the conference. And thanks to Willow for convening this group. I have a lot to take away. And thank you for the privilege of knowing you.
Thank you.
Dana, Syra, Kathy, Claire, thank you so much. This was an incredible panel, and I echo Dana's sentiments. It's just been wonderful to get to know you through this process. And I can see from the comments, you know, a lot of affirmation for what you've described. Appreciate those extra encouragement around self-care. It's definitely, it's been a very heavy lift to bring the conference to a virtual format. So I can relate and you know, just appreciate those reminders. So we are going to transition into another short break for self-care, to enjoy some stretching and some movement. And I know it's also a great you know, chance to use the restroom if you need to, take a bio break, grab something to eat. Bridget Hardy is going to come back on to lead us for a 10-minute session for exercise. And then get ready for just an incredible closing talk by Jillian Speece. I've seen in the comments that a lot of you are connecting with sort of the creativity, the artistry that that Syra presented to us. And Jillian is a creative entrepreneur, and I think you are really, really going to love getting to know her. Bridget, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Willow. I'm going to ask that people start just by, if it's comfortable for you, getting up from whatever chair you might be sitting in and just walking around your room or the chair you've been in or the desk. Just doing a little bit of pacing and starting to take yourself out of your head and into your feet a little bit, into your body. And as you slowly walk around the room, taking a moment to feel your breath, even in that walking and standing position. And then putting a little further thought into some things that were touched on in the last session, these things we do to make ourselves higher performers. Maybe it's our tendency towards perfectionism or, you know, big to-do lists. And set those things aside. There may be aspects of those things that are always occupying a certain space in your brain. What does I have to do after this? When this session is over, who do I have to call? What kid do I have to go check on? What emails do I have to send? Doing your best to just put that aside as you walk through this space in your house or your office. These strategies we have are very helpful for us, but they are also can keep us from turning inward. So we're just putting that aside for now and continuing to walk, feeling the solidness of the ground, the floor, the carpet underneath our feet, looking at the walls around us. These things too are protectors in our lives. They help us function, they shelter us. And even as you see them and feel them around you, also thinking that they are not you. And they help you function in this modern world and help protect you. But they are not you. And that's really what we're trying to feel in just a couple moments here before we go back into session, is a deeper you, a deeper us. Talked a little bit about strength in the last break. And now I'd like you to focus on vulnerability, which is not a weakness, as many writers and gurus have said. But it can be something we don't get to spend very much time with. So we'll be coming back into a seated position. We're going to turn in our chairs to the left. And let that left leg hang over the side, one side of the chair, and your right leg hang over the back side of the chair. We're going to do some seated yoga poses. You'll have the option to take these to standing if you like. But we'll start this way to ease in. And try to straighten that back leg to the best of your ability while you keep this left leg bent with your ankle right under your knee. And then you're just gonna inhale those arms up. And there's nice long energy in the arms. If you want to try to raise this up out of the chair, you have that option. You also have the option to be somewhere in between with maybe some hands on the front of the chair seat and the back of the chair to give you a little support. But here we are in a supported warrior one, and every warrior needs to be supported. And then we're just going to come back down to the seat if we came up from it. We're going to drop our hands into sort of a light hugging position, and we're going to lean over that front knee. So we've gone from that posture of strength into one of simply just comforting ourselves. And recognizing that as strong as we are still mortal, and it's okay to not be strong all the time, and that we have to allow for that. Coming back up, reaching those arms outward, we're going to rotate this to the right. So we're still keeping that left knee pointing the same direction, but we've opened up into a supported warrior two. If you want to take that off the chair, you can. Turning your head to the left, looking over the knuckles of your left hand. Feeling your breath in the posture. And bring your arms back to your shoulders, back to that hug position, and lean over to the left towards that bent knee. You need to go back to the chair for a little support. You take that. And bringing ourselves upright. Let's take a moment on the chair just to change sides. Right leg bent now. Left leg stretches out long behind you. Inhaling the arms up into supported warrior one. If you want to press into the floor and lift yourself off your chair with or without the assistance of your hands on that chair, you have that option. And then bringing hands to your shoulders, crossing those arms over your chest and leaning forward. Hips can be on the chair or hovering above the chair, whatever feels right to you. And then coming back up. Opening up into warrior two on your chair, getting your feet set, rising up from the chair from there if you'd like. Obviously, you can be doing these all without the chair. Gives us a little extra support. And then again, taking our protective arms down, hugging and going over to the side. So we're going over to the right. Slowly coming back up to center, you're going to take a seat on your chair and come into a seated position. We've got just a couple minutes before the end of this portion. So just coming seated, grounding your feet in the floor, resting your palms on your hands if that's comfortable, or letting them hang to the side. If you feel comfortable lightly closing your eyes, go ahead and do that. And take both hands to your heart. Just resting your palms on your own chest. And a message to your body that it doesn't have to be a high performer all the time. It doesn't have to meet expectations all the time. You don't have to meet expectations all the time. And mostly that's impossible to do fully anyway. But feel your vulnerability. We love to think of our bodies as strong, and certainly they are. But they're fragile mortals as well. We tend to think of death as an unusual occurrence, the uncertain thing, the tough break. And the truth is that every day we're alive is very unusual and uncertain. And death is in fact very predictable. And when this truth is received openly, it allows us to receive the gift of every day with tremendous appreciation for its preciousness. And the realization that we are made vulnerable just by living. These are very vulnerable times, which can open us up to something more tender inside us. And if you can, even right now, take a moment to feel the sadness of the times that we're in. Without the normal protections we might employ. Without telling people we're fine when they ask, when maybe we're not. Taking a moment to meet our feelings, not with strength, but with softness and receptivity. And simply allowing yourself to feel the vulnerability of the times. Seeing as you do this, if you can't name any feelings that you sense inside yourself. A little bit of anger, a little bit of frustration or confusion, whatever it might be. Grief, you might sense grief, which is ultimately a sign of appreciation. For potential loss, or a good thing lost, or a mourning of an unfulfilled need or desire. In this way, grief is a longing for what was or could be or could have been. And sometimes it's a longing for what still could be. Pema Chodron again says, we think that the point is to pass the test or overcome the problem. But the truth is that things don't really get solved. They come together and they fall apart. Then they come together again and fall apart again. It's just like that. The healing comes from letting there be room for all of this to happen. Room for grief, for relief, for misery, for joy. And as we prepare to leave this space, continue to know that you can drop in and out of your vulnerability to some extent. I think we feel a little danger in that. We don't want to get too messy in places where I'm prepared to do that. But we can drop in and out and feel what's in us before resurfacing with the knowledge of having seen ourselves, our exposed and real selves, and being able to hold that self with us as we act and move in the world. Pema also says that if someone comes along and shoots an arrow into your heart, you can stand there and yell at that person, but it's much better to turn your attention to the fact that there's an arrow in your heart. So feeling our vulnerability is a way of doing that, of seeing the arrows in our heart, which is the first step to getting them out. If you had your eyes closed, you're slowly opening them back up to the world, to the screen before you, the walls before you, the floor underneath you. And you're preparing to move back in to what you need. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Bridget. Thanks for helping us take a little bit of time to slow down and really take care of ourselves. I encourage people to find Bridget if you want to post your connection point on LinkedIn or on Facebook. But Bridget offers some incredibly fun and wonderful exercise sessions. And if you want to do some coaching with her, she's she's available. And we are ready to have Jillian Speece bring us home with this webinar. Becky is here to do an introduction and moderate your questions. Jillian, welcome. We love you and we can't wait to hear from you.
Hi, everyone. I want to, I'm so excited to introduce my dear friend, Jillian Speece. She has been a mentor and a sister in entrepreneurship over the past 3 years. She is a musician and an activist with the band The Bergamot, and she is also someone who lives everything that we've been talking about today. She's the founder of Wild Wondrous Women, in addition to her work as a musician, and she's been featured in USA Today, Women's Day magazine, and People magazine. As I mentioned, resilience, opportunity, and connection are things that she has used to build the life that she lives today. So she has so many insights to share with us. And I'd like to welcome Jillian. Yes, thank you. Somebody mentioned Emmy award winning. Thank you. I forgot to mention that. Thank you, Marcy. Emmy award winning. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you, Becky. I am so honored to be with you all today. I'm going to start off with a song called 1 Mile. In a cafe up in Brooklyn, there are two people fall in love. Up the street there, about a mile away, there are two people shooting up. Now the world can seem so strange when you're only 1 mile away, but we must stand tall. Together we rise, apart we fall. So that's just a snippet of our song, 1 Mile. And thank you, babe. My husband, he's exiting out. He just played that with me. It is such a joy to be with every single one of you right now. This is an incredible time to be alive on our planet. There is a beautiful awakening happening, and I'm going to start by introducing myself to you. So my name's Jillian Speece, and Becky, you did such a great intro. So she mentioned a few things. I'm a singer-songwriter, I'm a musician, I'm an activist, I'm an entrepreneur. I was born and raised in South Bend, Indiana. So shout out to everybody in the Hoosier State. And growing up in South Bend was pretty much a wonderful childhood. I had a great childhood. My mom and dad are the best, and I have an older sister, Jackie. But one of the things that always was hard for me growing up, it was that I always felt different. I felt like I never quite fit in with the rest of the kids in my class. I was always daydreaming, or I was always creating, or I just wanted to do art. I wanted to do music. I wanted to show up and play and use my imagination. And I felt like the structure of school, where you wake up and then you go to school all day long, it just never worked for me. I wasn't a horrible student, but I wasn't a great student. I was horrible at math. And so at 7, I was diagnosed with ADD, which to many of you who know me doesn't seem probably like a big surprise. But when you're diagnosed at the age of 7 with something where doctors are like, oh, you're definitely different. Your brain works differently. You think differently. You're definitely creative. And there was one of two ways that could have gone. In my household, I could have been, put on medications, which could have been a reality for me, and kind of doled down my brightness. And some medications do work for a lot of people, so definitely not dissing it. But for me, I never felt like that was the right way. And I was really blessed that my mom read a lot of books and was like, no, being ADD is actually a gift. So that was cultivated in my household, and thank God, because I definitely wouldn't be here talking to you today had that not been the case. So I really started finding refuge in music and singing and songwriting, and also I started a couple side hustle businesses at the age of 9. I started a lawn mowing business. I started pet watching and babysitting with my older sister. We called it J&J business. Anyways, so that was kind of the beginning of where I came from. And because I felt so different, I always thought in the back of my mind, maybe something was wrong with me. And I had a lot of anxiety because of that. And because of the anxiety, I started overeating and really just eating my emotions. And so that caused a lot of turmoil in my life as a young child, because I would be made fun of sometimes at school, and it kind of exacerbated me feeling different. So my life journey has been always set around loving myself and listening to my intuition. And that's kind of what's led me here today. And I'm very excited to share some things about my talk that I'm giving. And I'm going to actually right now share the screen with you all. And here we go. Let's see here. Okay. So my talk is on "You Were Made for This Moment, Thriving in Uncertainty." Now, the beginning of my life started in South Bend, Indiana, but I really had to forge a way for myself to get out and to pursue my passion of music and being an entrepreneur. And after college, I moved to New York City. And really, that's where the fun began for me. So the next slide, let's see here. Okay, I've got to change this. Okay, here we go. Okay. So, of course, I'm Jillian Speece, and I moved to New York City in 2014 after I got married to my husband, Nathaniel, who is my other half in the Bergamot. We are an indie folk rock band. We write our own music. We tour all over the world. And that's been, pursuing music is such a big passion, and it just lights me up. So we moved to New York City to pursue that passion. And living in New York City tested me on so many levels. Just for example, doing your laundry there is a whole process, and it costs a lot of money. So you have to walk down all these flights of stairs, lugging your laundry all the way up blocks and blocks to get to the laundromat. Then you have to pay $11 to do your laundry, and then you got to go do something else, and then you got to walk all the way back and then bring it up back to the stairs. So everything in New York was difficult, and that built resilience. That's really where my resilience muscle started growing. And this brought me to my husband and I to the Unity Collective tour. So we moved to New York City, and that would have been right before 2015, 2 years before. So we were living in New York. We were touring from New York, and we did a tour in 2015. And on that tour, we met hundreds of fans from all over the world. And we just started getting a pulse that we were about to enter into a crisis in America. We were already in a crisis that was hidden. And we could sense that division was growing in our culture. And so we decided to do something about it. And that is how the Unity Collective 50-state tour was born. This is a picture of my husband and I standing on top of our beloved station wagon called the Unity car. It has thousands of messages of unity from that tour written on it, from all walks of life, all parts of America. And what we would do is we packed up our station wagon, left our tiny Brooklyn apartment with a guitar, a couple pillows, and 2 backpacks. And we decided to go out into America to spread a message of unity and radical inclusivity for all people. But in order to do that, we used our art. So we would perform songs at these venues, or even stand on top of the car and perform in the street. We went to the RNC, the DNC, to spread this message of radical inclusivity. And we invited everybody in to sign their message. So really it was an act of listening to America during the 2016 election period. And we, as individuals, myself and my husband, we believe that we are more united than divided through music, so art, community, and collaboration. And that's where we can really, when we focus on those positive things, we can really grow there. So as we were on this tour, we started seeing all these beautiful humans from all over the world that were in America, because we toured all 50 states, every race, nationality, socioeconomic background, gender, disability. And we were reaching our hands out and saying, hey, we want to hear from you. We want to hear your voice lifted. Please write your message of unity on our station wagon. And what we realized is that as we started talking to all these thousands of people, we started realizing we are the same. We all are humans. We need to have empathy and love for each other, and really just listen to each other. And so we realized that 2015 for us, when we started this, was a wake-up cry. Like, we could sense something was wrong. 2016 started showing all the cards, and we realized that we are a country in crisis, and really we're a world in crisis. But I'm just going to focus on my direct journey with the Unity Collective. So we realized that we're a nation in crisis. And something that I learned is that crisis itself, in crisis is an opportunity to go back and decide what really matters. It's an opportunity to readjust our life and lead a life that is fundamentally more nutritious for our spirits and souls. So when you're in a crisis, so we live in a nation that is divided. Our goal on the Unity Tour was to unite a nation that is divided. It was the most difficult thing I have ever set out to do. And really, it was just about performing music from the heart and sharing love and listening with our ears, listening to people. Where are you at? How can we help? What is it that we can do? So in 2016, we saw in our country that it was in there was a growing chasm between this side and that side, and everybody was going after each other. And so we said, we live in America. We live in a country of free will where we can be what we want to be. Like, let's help encourage people to choose the right things, to choose peace and to choose love and to choose community. And so the Unity Collective, for me, it was one of the most uncertain things I've ever done. We were sleeping in our car. We did not have enough money to make it to the next location. We would busk on the street some nights to put enough gas in the tank of the Unity car to get it to the next state. I mean, we went to over 250 cities. We played 264 shows. It took us 8 months. And this was all starting January 1st, leading up to the election of 2016. So the first thing is, had I known how difficult this was and how uncertain it was, there's no way I would have done it. We racked up so much debt because the car would break down. We didn't have enough money, but it's something, and we risked our lives for this because we believe in the power of the human spirit, and we believe in the power of humanity to be able to come together and to just remember that we are all one. We are one. And we need to lift up the voices of marginalized brothers and sisters in our community. So this uncertainty was really intense. And there were so many nights where we just were like, okay, this car is on its last leg. It started off with 264,000 miles. And then it had, like, by the time we ended, it was at 312,000 miles. We traveled 50,000 miles that year, and with little to no funds, a guitar and 2 voices and 2 backpacks. And so, of course, sleeping in the car was super dangerous. There was one time where we couldn't find a place to sleep in Las Vegas. This was halfway through the tour. And so we slept on top of a parking garage. And of course, like, the car itself was a statement piece. You saw all the writing on it. So it drew a lot of attention. And around 4:30 at night, there was a huge black SUV that pulled up behind us, and we in that moment thought, we're definitely going to die, because we have a lot of gear and things as well. So we thought someone was just going to come to the window and just with a gun. So those were our moments. That was the uncertainty we were facing every day. We were facing that. The car was breaking down. We were meeting Americans and people from all over the world where they were at and saying, where are you at? What can we do to help? We were listening to people and reading their messages of unity. So, of course, this uncertainty led to a tremendous amount of resilience. We had to build muscles of resilience. And that's kind of where we're at right now in our society as well, with the pandemic, with everything that's going on with Black Lives Matter movement and beyond, with the turmoil and crisis of our earth. We are all facing uncertainty. We're in a crisis mode, we're facing uncertainty, and we are becoming more resilient because we're growing, we're learning, we're educating ourselves, we're putting ourselves out there. And so this resilience happened by us realizing that we needed to go with the flow, and we needed to really make sure our faith was bigger than our fears. And the Unity Tour built muscles of resilience because they were forged in the fires of uncertainty, faith, and determination. Determination to build a better world and to unite all people, regardless of race, religion, gender, socioeconomic status, disability, and beyond. Which brings me to the importance of loving yourself enough to be yourself. The Unity Tour would have never happened had we not believed in ourselves and loved ourselves. In order to share love, you have to put on that face mask first. So when you're in an airplane and they're saying, oh, the oxygen levels are low, hopefully this has never happened to you, but you have to put on your face mask before you help someone else. This is the same thing. You have to love yourself first. You have to start reprogramming your mindset, and from your limiting beliefs to abundant belief patterns about yourself. And what I learned is, what you focus on grows in your life. So if you focus on positive things in your life, you focus on positive news stories. And of course, it's very important to focus on all news stories, to be educated, but not to constantly be consuming it all day long for 24 hours. To focus on positive people in your life, people that lift you up, people that inspire you. Go find awesome TED Talks with people who have done something that you want to do. Just constantly focus on those positive things. And by focusing on the positive, you're able to more easily take positive actions that will grow. And it's just micro actions in your life, micro thoughts about how you think about yourself, how you believe in yourself. Focus on what you can control. Anxiety comes when we focus on all of the things that we cannot control. And it is so easy to do that. It's so easy to let fear run the show and to focus on, oh, well, you know, this is happening, I can't control that, and then feel really bad. But what I'm here to tell you is you have all the power within you to make the changes, not only for yourself, but for our global community. Focus on what you have. This ultimately leads to a heart of gratitude. So instead of focusing on things that are out of your control, start focusing on the things that you have that are in your control, the things that you're doing that are positive, the actions you're taking that are positive. And this heart of gratitude will leave you with a higher vibrational frequency, and that'll allow you to better serve the world. And the fourth thing is the power of a positive mindset. So by taking micro steps to replace negative thought patterns and limiting beliefs. So for example, when I was younger and I was eating my emotions, I did not feel good. I was eating horrible food, and I knew that I just wasn't living up to my potential. And I was doing this to myself because I didn't know how to handle my emotions. I'm an empath, so I feel it all. And so one thing that I would say to myself is I'd look in the mirror and I'd be like, oh, I'm so fat. I feel horrible about myself. Or I'm ugly or whatever. And I remember, this was years after that, realizing that in order to replace negative thought patterns, you have to reach out and restructure everything. So when that thought comes into your head of, I don't love myself or whatever that limiting belief is, notice it, be aware of that, and then immediately replace it. No, I love myself. I am worthy. I am not the sum of my body. I'm the sum of my heart. And so two really fun things to do to help you restructure your thought pattern is say to yourself, I am unstoppable for like 5 minutes. If you feel horrible, I tell you what, if you go on a walk and just nonstop out loud say, I am unstoppable, I am unstoppable, I am unstoppable, you're going to pump yourself up. And then the second thing is when you feel bad about yourself or whatever the situation, or if you're going back onto limiting beliefs, say, I am worthy, because you are worthy. You are 1 in 400 trillion. The chance of you being alive is 1 in 400 trillion chances. So that makes you a unique snowflake. There's no one like you, and you've got to start treating yourself like that and thinking like that. So, living from the heart. This is what my life has been focused on, living from the heart and pursuing my passion. I knew I was destined to be an artist, a musician. I love being an entrepreneur, which is why I created Wild Wondrous Women, because I wanted to be able to lift my sisters up from all around the world and build a community that revolves from the heart. So this picture right here was taken at last year's Wild Wondrous Women's Retreat. And I started the retreat out by just everyone embracing each other, because we need more love. And I miss a good embrace. So when this whole pandemic is over, I just cannot wait to hug everybody. So this slide is all about flowing and finding joy in the present moment. I've always wanted to surf. Ever since I can remember, I've always loved the ocean. I've always loved the idea of surfing, but I grew up in the Midwest where we have Lake Michigan that's freshwater. So I was terrified of sharks. Just the thought of a shark in the ocean, like I would only really go up to my knees and like, okay, I'm good. So this last October, we were visiting our good friends, Victoria and her wife, in San Diego. And Victoria is a Notre Dame alum. And she's actually the one standing with the blue swimsuit on holding the surfboard. And we were at their house and they're like, hey, we're going to go surfing. They're like, do you want to come? And I don't know if it's because of the long hair or what, but maybe they thought I already had surfed. And my husband has long hair too, but he probably would never surf. So I said, you know what? I am going to go surfing. I don't know how to surf, but I've always wanted to surf. And here's what I realized. Surfing is like life. I had to put my faith in my friend Victoria to teach me how to surf. And she started teaching me how to surf on the sand. Then we swam out. And the whole point is you're facing your fear. So my fear was the shark, right? The shark eating me. But when you get out in the ocean, you have two thoughts. You're either going to focus on the shark eating you, or you're going to focus on the possibility of catching a wave. But you cannot focus on both because you'd freak out too much. So I said, you know what? I'm just going to put the sharks in the back of my mind. I'm just going to focus on the present moment, on catching a wave, and put all my energy on that. And I caught a wave and I rode a wave in and I felt unstoppable. I felt powerful. I felt like, yes, I did it. I overcame my fear of sharks and I did this. And I had a revelation. So the sharks in the water, they're there. They're always lurking. And I realized that the shark is like our inner critic that's in our mind. It's always there. It's always lurking. It's always bringing up all the things that we should be afraid of that can hold us back. Or, oh, you shouldn't do this because you're not qualified. Or, you should be afraid of this because they're better people, whatever it is. Or, ooh, you should be afraid of this because what will these people think of you? So I realized that the shark is really your inner critic, and that it's so important for us to face that inner critic, and whatever is inside of you that is what you're destined to do, or whatever that your talent or gift is, that you have to face that. You have to be brave. And it's all about awakening your most inner desire. So the shark really is the thing that's holding us back. It's the fear, it's the inner critic. But as women on this planet, we have to be brave enough to step up and say, no, I'm not going to let you run the show anymore. So I really realized that flowing and finding joy in the present moment is all about facing your fears so you can live from the heart. And that brought me to this time. So we were getting ready to open up for One Republic at the University of Notre Dame in a stadium this April. Then the pandemic hit. So we were like, oh boy, what's going to happen to our touring schedule? And of course, in these times of great uncertainty, fear wants to take the wheel, wants to be the captain, but we cannot let it. This is what our calendar looked like going into April 2020. We were leading into the biggest financial year of our lives, the biggest shows, and it was packed. This is what happened within 24 hours of COVID-19 happening. So we were in Austin, Texas at South by Southwest. And okay, so this is loading, but essentially what this is trying to show you is each of these days actually erased within 24 hours. And we lost all of our shows. And so we are on tour. We're in the middle of touring, promoting our brand new album, Mayflies. And we're like, what now? We're artists. Like, this is what we do for a living. And so this actually, I don't know why it's not working right now, but it's a video and it shows all these being erased. You can kind of get the idea. And so we thought, well, now what? Like, we're literally in the middle of Texas. It's too dangerous to go back to the East Coast or to the Midwest. The virus is taking over. So we knew that we needed a perspective shift. And we put our faith in God. We were praying, and within 48 hours, a friend of ours called us and said, hey, why don't you come and stay in Sedona? We just moved out of our house. You can stay there while all this is going on. So we went from being out in the middle of the road to being in Sedona, which is where I'm coming to from now. And when we got here, we said, we are not going to let this pandemic destroy everything that we've created and to stop us. We are not going to let this happen. So we had a huge perspective shift. We said, we are going to be aligned with positivity. We're going to start every day with a heart of gratitude. We're going to be persistent in our pursuit of our career and also the other endeavors that got paused. We also decided to start working out every week, and I have eaten 100% plant-based since we've been here, so feeling really great. And the fourth thing, which is really important, so if you're a business out there, it's contributing. It's adding value. We thought to ourselves, how can we add value during this time from a singular location where we're used to touring? This is something that we can all put in the forefront of our mind. How can we add value to our communities? How can we add value to people that are our clients? And so we had a huge perspective shift, and that led us to some really incredible opportunities that have happened since we've been here. We had one of our songs picked up in London on a big commercial advertisement. We have been going live every single day. Today marks day 80 on Facebook and Instagram, playing music and spreading a message of unity and positivity. And we've gotten so many virtual gigs, and also big companies and small companies alike have been hiring us to do special Zoom events for their clients. So we stayed positive, and these are all the new opportunities that happen. And so this leads me to the conclusion of this speech. And I want every single one of you to know that if you are alive right now, you are made for this moment. All of your heartaches, all of your pain, all of the trials and tribulations in your life have brought you to this moment. and you are big enough to handle what's coming next and this moment. You're growing and stepping fully into who you're supposed to be, and you're showing up. So if you're alive right now, you are made for this moment, and everything has led you to this point. You're showing up and you are still here. And this is a level of resilience that is growing inside of you every single day. So I want to thank you for showing up and for investing in yourself. It's so important to believe in yourself and to love yourself, to show kindness and to be gentle to yourself and other people around you. We are in a time of collective and personal awakening to what has been in the shadows, oppressive and imbalanced across our implemented systems as well as our personal realities. The process of awakening can be painful because new realities precipitate shifts. Everything has to fall apart to come back together. Tomorrow is not promised for any of us, which lends us to living in the present moment, which is truly all we have ever had. We are the change makers. Don't forget that. You are the change makers. I am a change maker. We are a collective group of change makers during this time. And we must start to remember that we can't change the past, but we can certainly help make the future better. You are unstoppable and you are made for this moment. Shine on and let the light in you radiate to all. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak today, and I'm excited to take some questions here.
Great, thank you, Jillian. And if it would be okay, would you mind closing out your slides at this point? Yeah, so we can see you. Yeah, it's I knew when I've just been attending this whole thing today, I knew you were going to be able to really bring this all home for everybody. So it's just really wonderful to hear your stories. And I want to invite people to ask questions if you have any for Jillian. I think if any of you out there are creative entrepreneurs, maybe working as artists, or people who are, really trying to figure out how to live more, openly with uncertainty in your life. We all, I think, are doing that right now. I see Susan Visser has raised her hand, and I'm not sure if that's to ask a question, but Susan, would you be able to type the question in the chat? Is that possible? Does anybody else have any questions? Because if not, I'm going to start asking you some questions.
Okay.
Good. Oh, that's all right, Susan. I'm sorry. I know we're all still learning. The Zoom curve is steep and we're all still learning. Okay, so Jillian, you mentioned books your mom read. This is Sheila Davis asking.
Hey, Sheila.
On ADD. So when you were mentioning that you have ADD, and did you say ADD or ADHD? I don't suppose either one.
They're very close, but I have ADD.
ADD, okay. Many people said that resonated with them. Some said they didn't get diagnosed until maybe later in life. And it's been interesting to kind of look back and consider what their life has been and now, how to deal with it. Or do you have any book titles or any resources that you would suggest for people who have ADD? I would say probably across the spectrum, both from when you were little and the books your mom read to you, or the books your mom read herself, or just any resources that you can think of.
Yeah. So what I can do, Becky, is I can send you guys a list, because I know you'll do a follow-up with all the women I can give you like some of the top books. But honestly, something that I have done throughout my life is I have found people that are extremely successful who have ADD, and I've watched and consumed a lot of their books and their TED Talks and their presentations. Marie Forleo, Tony Robbins, I could go on, but it's really when you feel different like that and you think differently and the regular structures of society haven't worked, you got to seek the people who have been really successful and see what they do. A lot of them are serial entrepreneurs. They do a lot of different things. I consider myself to be a part of that group as well, because I do the Bergamot, I have Wild Winters Women. I'm constantly creating new things, and that's totally okay, even though society's like, no, just focus on one thing. But if you're ADD, go for it.
That would be great. So we have another question here. Question for Jillian from Beth North. And she says, so difficulty with math. Have you risen above that as an entrepreneur in all of your business matters? And if so,
oh my gosh,
how
Beth,
do you handle that? Yeah.
I love this. So the good news is, as a businesswoman, I don't have to do algebra or calculus or any of that stuff anymore, which makes me very happy. And I'm actually, now that I'm a businesswoman, I love numbers. I love it. Like, I manage a lot of the Bergamot and I'm constantly crunching numbers. I love the nitty gritty. I have totally overcome that. It was just the structure of the way they taught that just did not connect with me. I'm very visual, a kinesthetic learner. I need to touch things. So being an entrepreneur, I've figured out ways to like really lean into that and love the financial part of things. That's like one of my favorite things. So great question.
Yeah, and so we are going to need to wrap up here, but we do have one other question that I think might be a great opportunity to close out. If you had any advice for somebody who's a creative and somebody who's really trying to figure out how to, just the best piece of business advice that you would have for a creative. I realize that's asking a lot to distill that down, but I know there's one. I know so I'm just gonna ask you to pull that out from your intuition. What would you say is the best piece of business advice for a creative in entrepreneurship?
The best piece of business advice I can give you if you're a creative or entrepreneur is to always listen to your gut. Your gut and your intuition will lead you there. Wherever there is for you, whatever type of success you want to see happen in your life. I've also realized that your intuition and your gut are oftentimes, the divine realm coming in to guide you. So it's like this co-creation thing that we have going on. So it's very important to really hone into that. It's very subtle, but when you start listening to those little things, or it could be as quiet as you're literally washing dishes, and your intuition, or from yourself, but also the divine realm is like, hey, why don't you or you think of someone and you're like, I'm just going to reach out to that person, and maybe they lost someone in their life. That's something that has to do with relationships. So the same with business. You could be doing an active, for example, you could be creating a presentation and you're like, okay, I'm going to do this, but maybe it feels off. And you can literally in the last minute scratch the whole presentation and pivot onto something that is in alignment that you keep getting hits on. You're like, no, I've got to scratch it and then go with this. And that's listening to your intuition. So it's very important to just practice being quiet enough to empty yourself out to get those downloads.
Yes. Thank you so much. Being quiet enough to empty yourself out in order to really hear that voice that's inside of you. I hope that I think we've really left everyone today with all of this, with so many wonderful ways to now be able to do that in their own life. I want to thank you so much. And to those women, there were a handful of questions that did not get answered, and we will follow up with you, Jillian, with their information, so you might be able to get in touch with them personally after this.
I would love that. And I just want to thank you and the whole team at St. Mary's for doing this. This is so important. We need to lift up each other and also to support women who are entrepreneurs from all over every background. It's so important. So I'm so thrilled to be a part of this. And if anybody is interested, I have a working cut of our documentary that I'd be happy to share with you. So I'll give that information to Becky. And of course, you can listen to our music, The Bergamot, on Spotify and on Apple. We have a new album out. Thank you so much.
Yes,
Shine
and find
on.
them on Facebook or Instagram at 10 p.m. Eastern every night.
Yes.
Today's day 80. So
80.
All right. Thank you so much.
Shine on. Thank you.
Thank you, Jillian. Thank you, Becky. I would love to hear from our audience in the chat. Just give us one word, one sentence, how you're doing at the end of this webinar. We hope it was a wonderful, wonderful experience for you. I want to thank everyone for asking thoughtful and thought-provoking questions, for investing in yourselves, for helping us raise money for the Spark Women Business Accelerator. In just a couple of minutes, we're going to close out the webinar and transition over to the last portion of our event, which is connection and connecting in small groups. And I do apologize that we don't have the option to break into the small groups on the webinar. So I will post in the chat in just a moment, and you received it via email, the link to our Zoom meeting that will allow that small group experience for everyone. And but I did want to say, again, just another thank you to First Source Bank, our sponsor. Thank you to our other partners and sponsors. The team with Momentum Marketing was just incredible working with us. Our community marketing partners, South Bend Elkhart Regional Partnership and RISE. Also a special thanks to Lori Hiscock with Ruoff Mortgage. And a huge, huge, huge debt of gratitude to the most amazing planning committee that anyone could ever ask for. I'm hoping to bring our planning team all up on video just so you can see this incredible group. And we're gonna see if we can do that. But the co-chair of our committee, Gabriela Maxwell, Jory Fitzgerald, Nancy Oshanowski, Cass Garlett, B. Phillips, Elise Paul, Sophia Fleming, Paula Sowers, Rebecca Go, Bethany Hartley, Alicia Brown, Ramel Winfield, Eliana Cladenos, Janet Evelyn, Regina Hill, Janine Felderkon, Omeria Simbanda, Kate Oshanowski, Mana Derek Shani, Veronica Navarro, Abigail Laplace, and Jakayla Johnson. We're all just incredible part of this team, and I thank them so, so, so very much. And thank you all for being with us. If you are not moving over to the networking portion of this event, we would still love to connect with you in our private LinkedIn group, and you can we'll continue some of the conversations there, not at this very moment. We won't be in the LinkedIn group at this very moment, but we'll continue conversations there. And I hope for all of the attendees today to be able to make some additional professional connections that will really help them. I am going to post the link to our Zoom meeting, and the password to enter the meeting is EWVC 2020. We are very much looking forward to connecting with you in a small group session for the next 45 minutes. So look forward to seeing folks there. And again, thank you everyone for being here, and I hope that you will come back and join us for the next Engaging Women Conference next spring. We hope to offer it both in person and virtual in a hybrid format. So for our new participants across the country today, we hope you'll be able to join us again in the future.